I'm so upset. Oh my God.
Let's see how Earth responds to that.
All right, welcome to the Young Turks. Cenk Uygur, Anna Kasparian with you guys. As you all know, a lot of news. Another shooting in Minnesota from ICE, and I covered some of it over the weekend. Check that out on YouTube. But we're gonna give you a lot more about what's happening with ICE. And interestingly, right-wing reaction, which there's some terrible reactions and there's some interesting reactions. So now all of a sudden we're at ICE and finding some agreement with some folks. On the other hand, the folks we don't find agreement with, oh boy, Jesus, I mean, as bad as it gets, extreme as it gets, etc. So we're gonna cover all that for you guys today, and we'll show you the good guys, the bad guys. And then later in the program, a lot of interesting developments with Israel as well. What are they going to do with Gaza next? Where are they going to develop? Who's allowed to leave? Who's not allowed to leave? And their totalitarian control over the Palestinians continues. So lots of stories to get to. Casper, take it away.
All right, well, we begin with the Border Patrol shooting that took place over the weekend. Let's get to the details. 37-year-old intensive care unit nurse Alex Pretti was fatally shot by Border Patrol in Minnesota over the weekend. Now, oftentimes when we talk about ICE or Border Patrol related violence, people just kind of fall back on identifying the agents as ICE agents. In this case, my understanding is we're talking about Border Patrol agents, but the mission is similar, as we all know. Now, with that in mind, much like the Renee Good shooting, the claims and statements made by various Trump administration officials fly in the face of the truth and contradict what we can all see on video. Before we get to the details, Cenk, is this the new normal where American citizens get gunned down by federal agents and then the federal government lies about the innocent American citizen who got shot and killed?
Yeah, so there's two parts to this story. One is shooting unarmed people in the streets, and he was unarmed because they'd already taken his gun away when they murdered him. And what kind of police state is our government setting up right now? And how is that going to affect both the left and the right? And then the second topic is the giant lies of the Trump administration, calling this person a terrorist who was about to be an assassin. Right. So the lies are over the top and should give you a sense of who's right and who's wrong.
Now, before we show you the various videos that we've prepared for this segment, I actually want to start this off with the initial statement coming from the Department of Homeland Security. I want you to keep in mind what the Department of Homeland Security said in this post as we watch the videos. So they wrote that at 9:05 a.m. Central Time, as DHS law enforcement officers were conducting a targeted operation in Minneapolis against an illegal alien wanted for violent assault, an individual approached US Border Patrol officers with a 9mm semi-automatic handgun seen here. And the tweet does include a photo of the weapon. Now, they continue to say that the officers attempted to disarm the suspect, but the armed suspect violently resisted. More details on the armed struggle are forthcoming. Fearing for his life and the lives and safety of fellow officers, an agent, meaning one, fired defensive shots. Medics on the scene immediately delivered medical aid to the subject, but was pronounced dead at the scene. The suspect also had 2 magazines and no ID. This looks like a situation where an individual wanted to do maximum damage and massacre law enforcement. Massacre law enforcement, okay? Approached officers with his gun, which gives you the sense that, oh, well, I mean, obviously that's gonna give you this visual of a person who is armed, brandishing their weapon, approaching officials or approaching ICE agents. Now, is that what really happened? Well, why don't we start off with the very first video here, and you can judge for yourselves if it looks like he approached ICE agents with a gun drawn. All right, so you see the scene. All right, so you're about to see Pretti is the one who is on the street, and he's walking back. He's walking back, he's the one. ICE agent pushes a woman to the ground, or Border Patrol agent, I should say, pushes her to the ground, pepper spraying her. Pretti is the one who's attempting to help her get up. And as he's trying to help her, you see several agents pepper spraying, you see a struggle ensue. Now, I wanna go to the next video. This is not the video of the shooting. We're gonna get to that in just a minute. I'm just showing you what happened leading up to the shooting, because in this next video, you will see that Pretti is holding something. It's not a gun, but I want you to take a look at what he's holding and then ask yourself, is this an individual who appears to be an imminent threat to Border Patrol agents? Take a look. All right, Pretti's there on the street. Oh, that's a Border Patrol agent walking up to him.
Yeah, unroll your windows. No, you're spraying.
Okay, so the driver's driving by. Pretti has the hat. What is he holding?
Just go around.
Okay.
So that's a cell phone.
That's a cell phone, he's not holding a gun. Okay, so, and you also see he's the one backing up as the Border Patrol agents are approaching him as he is holding his phone to record because he was an observer. Okay, one more video. Let's go to the video of the shooting. So I wanna warn you, this is where the shooting happens. Pay close attention to the physical altercation and the bullets that are fired. All right, so as you can see, it's a chaotic scene. The agents separate the woman from Pretti, who Pretti was trying to help her up.
What the f*** did you just do? What the f*** did you just do? What the f***?
So that's where the shooting happens. So we also know that Pretti was in fact carrying a weapon. He was carrying a firearm. That has been widely reported. It was a legal weapon. Not only was it registered, he had a permit for concealed carry. And law enforcement, we're gonna go to law enforcement, what they had to say about the weapon in just a minute. But before we do, Cenk, opportunity to comment.
Yeah, so some on the extreme right are saying he attacked ICE. I mean,
it's obviously not true.
Look, you just saw the video. So this is a litmus test of whether you have eyes and ears. Did he tackle the 6 ICE agents at once? Or did they push him first?
They pushed the woman first.
They pushed the woman first, then when he's trying to help the woman, they push him first. They accost him, they tackle him, and in the video where you could see they take his gun away, they take his gun away, they disarm him, and then they kill him. And then there's a pause in the shooting, and then they shoot 5 more times to make sure that he's fully executed.
So let's actually show those videos though.
Yeah, we're gonna show that in a second. My point here though is that some folks on the extreme right are saying he had it coming. If that's he had it coming, that's interfering with law enforcement and assaulting poor victims of law enforcement. Look, at that point, you're so mental, I can't, there's
no reasoning with unreasonable people.
There's no reasoning with you, right? Like, because that's such a Rorschach test. You know, you remember that white dress, purple, blue dress? And you're like, no, it's an orange dress. Like, you saw the video. How could anyone in their right mind think Pretti is a monster assassin who is looking to execute those agents? Come on, you have to be a lunatic to believe that. So, all right, so is it worth murdering this guy? Wait till you see the videos of him being disarmed.
So I want to first start off with local law enforcement, which gave a press conference soon after the shooting occurred and answered questions about Pretti's possession of a firearm. Let's take a quick look at that.
I think the video speaks for itself. What I can tell you is we have identified this person, 37-year-old white male, resident of the city. The only interaction that we are aware of with law enforcement has been for traffic tickets, and we believe he is a lawful gun owner with a permit to carry.
lawful gun owner with a permit to carry. He did nothing wrong. Listen, you either support gun rights or you don't. You are either in favor of concealed carry with a permit or you don't support it. But you can't on one hand argue that you're like a defender of the Second Amendment and then provide cover for federal agents gunning down Americans simply because they were in possession of a legal firearm that they never even brandished, okay? Now, what's even more damning, Cenk, is the fact that he was disarmed prior to the shots being fired, prior to him being killed.
Before we go to the disarming, you also can't be in favor of Kyle Rittenhouse going to a protest with a weapon, brandishing it and using it and killing people, but this guy can't show up with a gun that he never brandished or took out to a protest. Make up your minds. You can't have both. It's totally impossible.
So I wanted to show you a slowed down video which will help you see without and understand without a shadow of a doubt that he was disarmed prior to the agents shooting and killing him. Take a look.
On the left-hand side, the agent that's walking away has Pretti's weapon already before the shooting. And now you see the agent take out the gun on the left-hand side and start shooting him. And then, of course, you've got the first round of shots. They pause. They're like, wait, we're not sure we murdered him yet. And they take 5 more shots to make sure that they've executed him.
So look, there needs to be an independent and in-depth investigation. I've seen some claims that an officer's firearm went off accidentally, and that's what caused the volley of bullets we hear. We are now hearing reports from Trump administration officials that it wasn't just one agent who fired, it was 2. We don't know what the identities of these agents are because they will not disclose any of that information to the public. And there are issues with whether or not there will even be an accurate, independent and in-depth investigation into what happened. So we're gonna get to those details in just a minute. But Cenk, the aftermath of this shooting and the reaction from the Trump administration was very similar to the reaction we saw from the Trump administration following the ICE shooting, fatal shooting of Renee Nicole Good. Because the first thing they did is come out and refer to her as a domestic terrorist. In this case, you have some Trump administration officials referring to Pretti as an assassin, others referring to him, yes, as a domestic terrorist. I'm gonna get to all of that in just a minute, but any thoughts about the shooting itself before we move on to that?
Yeah, look, I think that ICE and Border Patrol and all those things are attacking these cities, and they're all blue cities, in order to cause this kind of violence and unrest and chaos. Why? They want us at each other's throats.
Yes.
And so now the extreme right is back to kill him, kill him, kill him, right? And the left is back to we hate you, and look at these guys saying kill us all, right? And so how do you expect us not to hate you after you celebrate the death of this person? The right wing, I know, will say then you celebrated Charlie Kirk. There we go, perfect. The people in power are like, yes! They're back at each other's throats. And second objective, establish a police state. And a police state doesn't care if you're armed or unarmed, doesn't care if he's right wing, you're right wing or left wing. Once you have a police state, the people they're gonna represent is not Republicans or Democrats. They're going to represent the powerful and the elites.
Yep.
And they are establishing that now. And they're saying, look, this is not even within the bounds of what we consider normal in America. A police state, but with badges and names. No. Armed, masked, anonymous gunmen murdering American citizens in the streets. And what they're doing here, guys, is they're testing the waters. Totally. How much will Americans tolerate? Can we actually murder Americans in the streets and get away with it? Because if we can, beautiful, then America is ready for a police state.
Yeah, that's exactly right. This to me goes well beyond immigration enforcement. Look, you can be in favor of enforcing our immigration laws and still speak out against government, federal agents abusing their power. And that's what's happening here. It's so obviously clear. And think about the history of this country. Think about the recent history of this country. Things get normalized very easily. So if you allow this to be normalized, if you allow militarized, masked federal agents to show up to cities across this country and gun down Americans, lie about said victims later after the fact, after gunning them down and robbing them of their lives, well, then no one's safe in this country. Then we already do live under a tyrannical government. So let's talk a little bit about the reactions from Trump administration officials following this killing. So as DHS did in the aftermath of the Renee Good shooting, they're now lying about the incident involving Border Patrol agents shooting and killing Alex Pretti in Minneapolis. Now here's Kristi Noem doing just that.
The White House has labeled the man who was killed in Minnesota as a domestic terrorist. Is that something you agree with? And have you seen any evidence to back up that claim?
When you perpetuate violence against a government because of ideological reasons and for reasons to resist and perpetuate violence, that is the definition of domestic terrorism. This individual who came with weapons and ammunition to stop a law enforcement operation of federal law enforcement officers committed an act of domestic terrorism. That's the facts.
Can you show me where he was carrying out acts of violence? You can't, can you? You can't. You can't show me any video or any example. There hasn't been a shred of evidence provided showing Alex Pretti being violent on the scene. Guess what? As American citizens, we have the right to record federal agents when they're in our towns, when they're in our municipalities, when they're in our cities. We have the right to do that. But ICE agents don't like to be recorded. I wonder why. Why is it that they don't believe in Americans' right to film them as they're out in public terrorizing these cities? Why?
Yeah, so Anna, two more things about that. So she says if you're doing it for political ideology and then you interfere with federal law enforcement, I wonder if what happened on January 6th meets that definition.
Well, that's okay because it's people on their side.
Yeah.
So as long as people on your side do whatever they want to do, you'll provide cover. But if a peaceful individual who's filming ICE agents or Border Patrol agents just happens to be on the scene recording them and they don't like it, well, then that's considered violence and they deserve to be gunned down.
Yeah, and secondly, so they are coming for our First Amendment rights, that's obvious, right? So, freedom of speech, no, unless you speak out against Israel on a college campus or you want to sanction Israel, well then we're going to take away your property rights, your First Amendment rights, and now Trump, if you criticize me, I'm going to take away freedom of the press, and I'm going to sue you, and I'm going to banish you, et cetera. So there goes the First Amendment in their mind. They would love to totally get rid of it entirely and have us serve that police state where no one's allowed to disagree with the government. And then now they're also coming for our Second Amendment rights. So look, I'm not a big Second Amendment guy to say the least. And I've always asked, hey, how do you define a tyrannical government? How do you know when you're supposed to, do what the right wing has been telling me is their dream? Like, you need a Second Amendment for tyrannical government, right? Well, we kind of have tyrannical government here, but then that goes back to my question of the last 20 years. How do you know when you're in a tyrannical government? What gives you the right to go after law enforcement with weapons? Now, I have never been in favor of the weapons in the first place, let alone going after law enforcement with weapons. But a lot of right wingers said, no, that's what you have to do that's why we have the Second Amendment. Now they're saying, the Second Amendment's BS. If you walk near a law enforcement officer, you object to a law enforcement officer, you try to protect a woman that they push to the ground, you do anything and you have a weapon, you should be murdered, you should be executed. You're the same guy? You can't be the same guy who told me you needed weapons to be able to object to a tyrannical government.
Yeah, and look, Cenk and I differ on the Second Amendment. I'm in favor of gun rights with some smart regulations to maybe try to prevent bad people from being able to access guns. So I'm in favor of federal background checks without the loopholes that ensure that people who shouldn't have guns are still able to buy them. But nonetheless, look, you have to be consistent on this issue. You can't say that you're totally okay with Kyle Rittenhouse. I remember when I said Kyle Rittenhouse showing up to the protests and the riots was a dumb idea, and people would get mad at me. No, he had the right to be there. He had the right to be there. Okay, great. Pretti had the right to be there. Pretti had the right to be there, and he wasn't brandishing his gun. He wasn't.
And Pretti didn't kill anyone. Anna and I had a debate about that at some point. I hated the idea of Rittenhouse showing up with a weapon. And if you ask me, and by the way, we are asking you, we got a poll on this. If you ask me, do you think Pretti should have showed up with a weapon? No, I say the same thing. I'm consistent on Rittenhouse and Pretti. Do I think that Rittenhouse should have been executed? Of course not. Are you insane? Do I think that Pretti should have been executed? Of course not. He didn't have the weapon on him when he was executed. He didn't brandish the weapon. He didn't take out the weapon. He didn't touch the weapon. Whereas Rittenhouse did all of those things and killed 2 people. So you have to be remotely consistent. By the way, the polls up on TYT.com. Should Alex Pretti and Kyle Rittenhouse have gone armed to the protests? A, only Rittenhouse, and he had a right to shoot anyone who threatened him. B, only Pretti, because he never brandished his weapon and has a right to carry it. C, both, it's a good idea to go to protests armed. D, neither, it's not a good idea to take weapons to a protest. I'm gonna vote D, Anna might vote B. I'm curious how you guys are gonna vote, but either way, you have to have a consistent standard that applies to everyone, not just, oh, well, I don't like him, so let's kill him. He's on the other side of me politically, so it's okay to execute him and give the police and the government unlimited authority to do so. But hey, but don't use it against me. That's not how things work.
My view is I am in favor of concealed carry with a permit, and he followed the law. I think anyone who is following the law should be protected, and the fact that they're following the law should not be cited as justification for their execution. So let's go to Stephen Miller, who, look, if you thought that he would ever tell the truth about this story, you might be the dumbest person in the country. Here's what he had to say. A would-be assassin tried to murder federal law enforcement, and the official Democrat account sides with the terrorist. No, you're the terrorist, Stephen Miller. You're the terrorist.
But by the way,
assassin. He was an ICU nurse who provided care to our veterans. He worked at the VA. He's an assassin.
Yeah. No. Look, if after that quote, if you believed in Stephen Miller at all, and God help you if you did, but that's okay. Now after the quote, you see there's no question Stephen Miller is a liar. No one in their right mind thinks he's an assassin. If you think he's an assassin, we're never gonna reach you because you're on a different planet, right? True. But for all of you who know, like whether even if you thought it was a justified shooting, you know he's not an assassin. So you now know for a 100% certainty that Stephen Miller will lie about anything. You think he's just gonna lie about other people? He's not gonna lie about you, the guy who loves the idea of setting up a police state, an authoritarian, tyrannical government. And by the way, notice the use of the word terrorist that they are using over and over again. That is the Israelification of our government. Because once you call someone a terrorist, you're allowed to murder them. You're allowed to do anything you want to them. And now they have started calling American citizens terrorists. Watch out.
I remember in the early years of the Iraq War, I remember the biggest fear for people like us was that this terrorist or the terrorist excuse to justify preemptive wars, the use of the word terrorism by the federal government, the label terrorist by the federal government in order to justify their actions will someday turn around and impact American citizens. And here we are today. So even some members of DHS are terrified by these lies, as reported by Fox News correspondent Bill Malugin, who, make no mistake about it, is very pro immigration enforcement, and as a result of that is very connected to sources over at DHS. So with that in mind, here's what he posted on X today. Quote, I'm told there is extreme frustration with DHS officials going on TV and putting out statements claiming that Alex Pretti was intending to conduct a massacre of federal agents or wanted to carry out maximum damage, even after numerous videos appeared to show those claims were inaccurate. While they say it was a terrible decision to show up with a gun and inject himself into a federal law enforcement operation, there is no indication Pretti was there to murder law enforcement. As videos appear to show, he never drew his holstered firearm. So thank you to Bill Malugin for reporting the truth on that. Other reactions come from Democratic lawmakers and politicians. So we have Governor Tim Walz of Minnesota, and he wants ICE out of the state, and you can understand why, considering the fact that it's only led to chaos and 2 American citizens getting killed. And he had a phone call with President Donald Trump today, which I had no optimism about, but it appears to have been a productive phone conversation. There have also been reports indicating that Trump is not happy with how DHS reacted or responded to Pretti's killing. And so following his call with Walz, he posted on Truth Social saying that Governor Walz called me with the request to work together with respect to Minnesota. It was a very good call, and we actually seem to be on a similar wavelength. I told Governor Walz that I would have Tom Homan call him, and that what we are looking for are any and all criminals that they have in their possession. The governor, very respectfully, understood that, and I will be speaking to him in the near future. He was happy that Tom Homan was going to Minnesota, and so am I. We have had such tremendous success in Washington, D.C., Memphis, Tennessee, and anyway, you get the point. The rest of it isn't as important. The most important part is that they had a call. I think Trump is realizing that he is losing a tremendous amount of support among some big name supporters of his, people who voted for him, right? So Dave Smith had already stopped supporting him, but you also have people like Tim Dillon, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Greg Abbott even came out and said, yeah, Trump needs to recalibrate here, right? So I think Trump kind of sees the tea leaves here, and as a result is kind of looking for a way to de-escalate, not because he cares about doing the right thing, but because he cares about public perception of his administration.
Even Ted Cruz slimed his way out of whichever hole he was residing in and started saying how they need to talk about these things in a different way. I mean, maybe execute the guy and then have a better excuse for it. But like when you've got Ted Cruz opposing you, that means you've lost. Because normally Ted Cruz is groveling at Trump's feet and licking between his toes. And, oh, please serve Israel, please serve Israel, right? But even he's apparently gathered up the courage to oppose Trump. And it was so shocking what has happened here in Minnesota that it jolted John Fetterman into remembering he's a Democrat. And even he said, I should get out of Minnesota.
He's disgusting. Anyway, so there are also 60 Minnesota business executives who signed a joint letter through the state's Chamber of Commerce calling for immediate de-escalation. So the list goes on and on. There are those who are trying to provide cover for this, but those voices are kind of being drowned out by the overwhelming negative response to what happened on the streets of Minnesota over the weekend. So when we come back from the break, I want to get into how the federal government is blocking an investigation into this. And we'll also tackle some other angles, including that whole Second Amendment angle to this story. Come right back.
All right, back on TOT. Let's start with YouTube members today. The Only Me I-43 writes in, so many lies. He was a patriot, he was protecting a woman. This is so painful. Yep, with a gal says, I know people who knew Alex. He was a great man, huge rally here yesterday. Yeah, every account has said that he was like an incredibly kind guy who only looked to help people. And by the way, like normally they do character assassination and they probably tried it in this case, but they couldn't come up with anything after they kill someone. But even if he was not an angel, you still don't get to execute him in the streets. He just happened to be one in this case. M33324 says, Cenk was on Piers Morgan, just saw the thumbnail. Can't wait for him to drag whoever he had to. What a wild and upsetting weekend it was. But you know what's interesting is that I didn't have to drag too many people.
I know, that was a really good episode. I haven't finished it. I've only watched maybe 15 minutes. It's a good episode because for once, Piers Morgan isn't providing cover for Trump's bad behavior.
Yeah, no, it's super hard even for the right wing to justify this. And so you'll see that they're kind of halfway like, it's kind of bad,
yep.
Right? So we dominated the day there. Although James Carville was weirdly
subdued
and cranky.
What do you mean weirdly? He's always cranky.
Well, that's true, but like on a different level. He eventually left in the middle of the show.
Oh, really? Yeah. Unannounced, like just dropped out?
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
Anyways, but nobody, like I don't think was being particularly mean to him. Anyways, so all of our appearances eventually go up on tyt.com/press. Check that out when you get a chance. Kevin Shea says, I don't know what's more shocking, them disarming and then executing a US citizen or the lies they tell afterwards. Yeah, that's a good question. They're both enormously shocking.
And, look, guys, it's really important that democratic states and cities make it very clear that they are willing to work with federal agents in deporting convicted criminals who are here illegally. Now, Minnesota claims they've been doing that, but make it a press conference where you state it very clearly, formalize it, right? That way you can't have the federal government argue that, well, this is what we're doing because it's a sanctuary state or a sanctuary city and they won't cooperate with us when it comes to these violent, dangerous criminals.
Yeah, they have no right to do any of that stuff anyway.
Yes.
But the sanctuary cities are a larger conversation. That's part of why Obama was able to deport so many people, because back then there were not sanctuary cities. That's a really interesting conversation. But the bottom line is de-escalate. But at the same time, protests are the most American things you could do. So can you do both, de-escalate and do a protest? Of course you can. Stay away from ICE and Border Patrol and all those guys. You're allowed to say whatever you want, whistle, etc. And I love that you do that, but what Anna's saying, what I'm saying is don't give them an excuse to shoot and then to blame the victim afterwards. 7th Fire 70 says, so the Second Amendment is okay for Republicans, just not liberals and Democrats. The hypocrisy is unreal. Erica Rutherford says, TYT is the first news to relate Kyle to this tragedy. All legacy media chickened out all weekend. Yep, CDN Norse Dog Dad says, call your senators today and demand that they vote no on ICE funding US Senate. All right, back on TYT, Cenk, Anna, Andrea, and I, AJ, Euphorial, Arcane Eclectic. Thank you for joining. We appreciate you so much. CDN Norse Dog Dad, thanks for gifting a membership as always. The join button's below. And one last one, Sammy B33 just joined as well by hitting that button. As sad and heartbreaking as this is, they wrote in, this is an excellent opportunity for the police to completely rebrand themselves. I'm happy to see some police standing up against these ICE atrocities. That's a great point, Sammy, because Minnesota police have actually been terrific on this. And this is a great opportunity, just like you're saying, to reclaim policing as serving the community.
As public safety.
Yeah, that's what it's supposed to be.
I agree.
They are, the local police in Minnesota are doing that. So yeah, it's a good moment to rally around good cops.
Yeah, to me, it was a really big deal that local police enforcement in Minnesota had that press conference to give us some clarity on some of the profiling that's being carried out by federal agents in their state, because it's impacting sworn officers too. So it's important for us to know that that's actually happening, that it's not a rumor, that it's not some left-wing conspiracy theory, it's actually happening. Anyway, I want to talk a little bit about how the federal government is potentially preventing a real investigation into Pretti's shooting, so let's get into it. There is some question as to whether the federal government is making moves to prevent an in-depth, independent investigation into the Border Patrol shooting of American citizen Alex Pretti. Now, Greg Bovito, who's in charge of Trump's immigration enforcement, says that, well, this is kind of very much on purpose. We don't even know the identities of the Border Patrol agents who were involved in this shooting, and that's very much on purpose. Let's take a look.
From what I understand, there were 2 agents who fired shots. We know one of the agents had 8 years experience, and we know he was a less lethal instructor and had this training. What did the other agent, what was his history? And are they both working right now, or are they on administrative leave?
All agents that were involved in that scene are working, not in Minneapolis, but in other locations. That's for their safety. There's this thing called doxing, and the safety of our employees is very important to us. So we're going to keep those employees safe. As far as the number of shots, the number of agents involved, that, again, is going to come out in the investigation.
Okay, so the individuals who were involved in fatally shooting an American citizen in Minnesota, their safety is the most important thing, according to Bovino. I should note that Trump has reassigned Bovino. He's no longer going to be operating out of Minnesota. He will be replaced with Tom Homan. And while I'm sure the bulk of our audience is not happy about that either, because Tom Homan is no dove when it comes to immigration enforcement. The fact of the matter is he has been a lot more professional than what we've seen from Kristi Noem or Greg Bovino. He doesn't come out and immediately slander, smear, defame people. He withheld comment following the Renee Good shooting, saying that there needs to be an investigation, and he'll be able to comment after an investigation. So we'll see if Tom Homan is gonna make the situation any better. But nonetheless, Greg Bovino is not a good look for the administration, and Trump realized that, which is why he reassigned him, meaning kicked him out of Minnesota. Now, Bovino said in a separate news conference that the agent who opened fire was an 8-year veteran of the agency. But now there are reports again that 2 agents fired shots. And more importantly, it does look like there isn't even going to be a real investigation into this. According to 2 senior law enforcement officials who spoke to the New York Times, the Civil Rights Division of the Justice Department, which has historically investigated shootings involving federal law enforcement officials, is not expected to investigate the shooting of Alex Pretti in Minneapolis. Todd Blanche, the number 2 official in the department, made the same decision after Renee Good was killed. And on a state level, you have Mary Moriarty, the elected prosecutor in Hennepin County, which includes Minneapolis. She says in a video statement that her office, along with state officials, was committed to conducting an objective investigation into the case. But that might not happen, Cenk, because it turns out that the state is being blocked from being able to carry out an investigation. In fact, here is Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension Superintendent Drew Evans explaining what he himself experienced.
This morning, I was in contact with the Minneapolis Police Department after the incident that you're all familiar with now. They requested our Force Investigations Unit respond to the scene and conduct such an independent investigation as we have in other recent incidents in the city of Minneapolis. What occurred was our team responded to the scene, and I was in contact with federal authorities to inform them that that was going to occur and that we were responding to the scene in Minneapolis. When our team arrived, they were blocked by federal agents with the Department of Homeland Security from accessing the scene. We worked with them and we're in contact with the FBI, trying to attempt to access the scene so we can gather evidence to understand what occurred and work through this process. Our team also secured a search warrant for the scene, which is an unusual move in a public area like that, but we did that attempting to have judicial approval to enter this scene to gather evidence. We were once again blocked by federal authorities to go in and do that scene examination.
So they're being blocked. I mean, this is not some random person on X. This is an actual Minnesota official who obtained, Cenk, the appropriate judicial warrant in order to carry out this investigation, but they're being blocked from being able to do so.
Yeah, so a couple things here. First, the excuse about doxing. I remember when Nicole Brown Simpson and Ronald Goldman were killed by O.J. Simpson. Oh no, I doxed them. No, with all potential murderers, we never try them. It's never public. You never get to find out because now the government runs a secret police state. And if they ever kill an American citizen or execute him in the streets, obviously you can never know who that was. They'll never be tried. And if that's not authoritarianism, I don't know what is. So, and for the people, which is now a small group, that is still defending the actions of these guys. Okay, then when a Democrat gets into office, is it okay if they have masked gunmen going around to right-wing protests, executing people, and then saying, sorry, you can't find out who killed them? That would be doxing. Of course not, because that's absurd. Okay, so number two, Trump is backpedaling. And that's good news. That's why he's bringing in Homan to replace Noam. Noam is kind of universally hated at this point. Plus, they screwed up by attacking Second Amendment rights. Kash Patel, Noam, all talking about, oh, well, you can't bring a gun to a protest. Obviously, you should be executed if you do that.
Insane.
Okay, that's a terrible idea. So they lost a bunch of support on the right and from their own voters for doing that. So he's trying to adjust. And so that's why they're taking the Border Patrol guy out, they're taking Noam out, and they're bringing new people in. So it'll be a nice soft touch with Tom Homan. Okay,
Yeah.
but at least it's not the, like what Kristi Noem basically in her handling of this so far has treated American citizens like her dog.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah.
Taking us to a gravelly pit and shooting us and saying, well, you had it coming. You were slightly bothering me, okay? And finally, on what you were mentioning with the cops not being able to do their jobs, the local and state cops. Well, as one of our members, Sammy B, who just joined, left a comment that we were talking about a minute ago, it's a great point to bring up here. This is actually a good moment for local cops to kind of almost rebrand because there was a lot of bad reputation, especially in Minnesota.
Yep.
Home of George Floyd, right? But here's the local cops doing the right thing, doing exactly what they're supposed to do, protecting the community, serve and protect, right? And the federal government's going, oh, you actually want to protect the community? No, we're not going to let you. No way. We're going to bottle up the evidence so no one can find out our crimes. You know who covers up things? A guy who's guilty.
That's exactly right. I mean, if you aren't worried about these Border Patrol agents or ICE agents carrying out acts of violence or doing things that are illegal, you would allow for an independent investigation to play out, both on a federal level and yes, on a state level as well. And there are some principled Republicans, so I want to give them a shout out. They do want investigations into this. For instance, you have Representative Andrew Garbarino, who's a Republican of New York and the chairman of the House Homeland Security Committee. Well, he formally requested that the heads of ICE, Customs and Border Patrol, and US Citizenship and Immigration Services testify at a full hearing. You also have this next graphic, let's put this up. This is Senator Rand Paul, who is also calling for an investigation, saying today I call on the heads of these agencies, ICE, CBP, USCIS, to testify before Homeland Security Committee. And I think that's important. So hearings are one thing. Obviously, a congressional hearing isn't going to lead to potential criminal charges. If there is enough evidence for criminal charges, I would really like for the state to be able to conduct an investigation. And I think the federal government, unfortunately, has lost a lot of trust among the American people when it comes to this issue. But if they want to conduct their own investigation, great, do it. But it doesn't seem like they really have an appetite to even do that. So we'll see how this plays out. I'm happy that there are some on the right in Congress who are calling for this investigation to take place.
Yes, you know, Dana Loesch, however she pronounces it, being principled. Really? Wow. Okay, credit where credit is due, right? In fact, I want to read you one of our members from TYT.com. As Boss Prophet said, I think the NRA coming out and defending Pretti's right to have that gun, kind of weird to agree with the NRA. Trump has forced us into some weird alliances.
Definitely.
Yeah, and that's actually a great example of it. I loathe the NRA, I can't stand them. But if they want to agree with us here in this case, I'm happy to take that agreement. And of course, as usual, Thomas Massie and Marjorie Taylor Greene and Tucker Carlson all seeming to be on the right side of this issue as well. Not to say that they're against ICE, they're just saying, the brother, I did have a right to carry that weapon, and that did not look good. That looked terrible, and that's not what we do to American citizens. Great, very happy to have that alliance.
And in fact, we'll talk about that more in depth when we come back from the break.
All right, back on TYT. Wandering Puerto Rican says, ICE is the IDF and Americans are the Palestinians. That's how they're treating us. Ding, 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 we have a winner. That's exactly how it is. In fact, a lot of law enforcement goes and trains with the IDF here in America. Why? Why are we sending them to train with like the Portuguese military or the Peruvian military? No, only the Israeli military. And then all of a sudden, our government starts calling Americans domestic terrorists. That's haunting. Okay, JJ Ray disagrees with me a little bit, or maybe a lot, I don't know. They say, Cenk, please stop saying that the Trump/powerful are doing this proposed to separate us. This has nothing to do with division. If you're willing to take the bait on this situation, there's no need for you to be given the grace of saying you are being misled. You're willfully supporting an execution of an innocent American citizen and are okay with fascists. Yeah, so it's a good point to clarify. No, like this particular case is so shocking that only the very extreme right is on the side of killing him. And there's, as I've said now like 3-4 times on today's show, there's no reaching those guys. Like I can't imagine a more extreme case.
I think I kind of understand what you're trying to say though, right? Like, I think that a story like this really helps you understand and see the individuals who are not guided by any real principles or morals or love for our Constitution, right? Like when you see so-called gun advocates justifying federal agents gunning down and killing an American citizen simply because he had a legal concealed gun on his person, well, you know that these are not honest individuals that you can have an actual conversation with.
Yeah, so
right?
There's that 25% or so of Republicans, we've shown it in the polling, right? Yeah. That are so extreme, there's no point in having a conversation with those folks. You could have the conversation, you could have anything you want, but it's not good. They're not gonna move, they're not gonna move. I don't care, because they're not gonna move, right? I care about the people that can move, and by the way, are moving, and this is actually a good example of it. Now there's the Second Amendment guys who have moved on this, and all the folks that we're gonna tell you about. Now we're not just talking about war, we're not just talking about Israel or Epstein, we're now on to domestic issues where they're beginning to agree with us on this. But guys, but even then, JJ, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm saying the sending of the ICE in the first place is meant to create the division.
I agree.
Right? Because most of the right wing does want the people removed. They don't necessarily want mass deportations, but it's get ICE in the street, have people react to it, and have it be a clash. And then, right versus left, great, perfectly divided. That's the point of sending them into the cities in the first place.
And I'm also very worried that there's this intention to cause chaos, division, anger among Americans who are focusing their anger inward, like attacking each other, to eventually get to a place where he can call for martial law. Like I'm genuinely worried about that.
This is the beginning of the police state. That's what we've been saying all day. Yes, Cenk's left and all year. Cenk's left tricep for Fury says he was a law-abiding citizen up to the moment they emptied their gun on him. Yep. TO 1790 says the Trump administration should have known that it is harder to lie now that everybody's armed with a camera in their pockets. Yeah, they can't adjust. It's amazing. They think. But guys, you know, kind of what's happening is they assumed we can lie to our own voters and they'll always believe us no matter how absurd. But they're now beginning to find out because of online media that doesn't work anymore. All right, back on TYT, Cenk, Anna, Amartu Singh Galdabark. There's no way I said it right, but I love you for joining. They hit the join button below. You can also do it through tyt.com/join. And we're trying to save you guys money. Real quick, tell you about Noble Mobile. That's your service carrier. If you're paying more than $50, they're gonna save you a ton of money every single month. I'm paying in the 30s because they also give you money back for not using your data, and we're all using Wi-Fi, so we don't use our data. So you're gonna save an enormous amount of money, and it changes absolutely nothing about your phone. You keep your phone, you keep your phone number. tyt.com/switch. They now have a new offer where the first month is only $10. tyt.com/switch. Do it now, it'll save you a lot of money. All right, Anna, what's next?
Real quick update. So Bill Malugin, who is that Fox News correspondent, very much in favor of immigration enforcement, is now sharing that multiple federal sources confirm to Fox News that Border Patrol Commander Greg Bovino and some, not all, Border Patrol agents will be leaving the state of Minnesota imminently.
Oh, that's great news. That's a wonderful update. And that is Trump recalibrating, going, okay, I screwed this one up. We got to taco our way out of here.
Don't even use taco, please.
I know,
because like, don't mock him for it. That's the right thing to do. Okay.
No, I hear you. Look, in fact, I said on Piers Morgan this morning, it's a silver lining for Trump that at least he can see when he is headed south and turns around. His intentions were still to go in that direction.
Yes.
I'm not giving him any credit for any of his instincts or his actions, but at least he knows that this is terrible for him, and he's beginning to turn around.
So let's talk a little bit about how some of these Second Amendment advocates don't really care for the Second Amendment at all.
You cannot bring a firearm loaded with multiple magazines to any sort of protest that you want. It's that simple. You don't have that right to break the law and incite violence.
I am sorry that this gentleman is dead, but he did bring a 9mm semi-automatic weapon with 2 cartridges to what was supposed to be a peaceful protest. I've been to a protest. Yeah. Guess what? I didn't bring a gun. I brought a billboard.
I don't know of any peaceful protester that shows up with a gun and ammunition rather than a sign.
Conservatives who for years boasted about being staunch Second Amendment defenders are suddenly changing their tune following the slaying of ICU nurse and ICE protester Alex Pretti in Minnesota. Now, Kash Patel, Scott Bessent, and Kristi Noem all suggested that federal agents were justified in shooting Pretti because he had the audacity to legally carry a concealed firearm. A firearm he never brandished, a firearm he never threatened anyone with, a firearm that remained in his holster the entirety of the time until federal agents disarmed him and then proceeded to fire 10 rounds and kill him. Unfortunately, this hypocrisy doesn't stop at the Trump administration officials, but before we get to the many examples, Cenk, your 2 cents.
Yeah, so it's interesting because now some of the elites in the government are agreeing with some of the extreme right, like Matt Walsh, and they're saying, if you bring a gun to a protest, we get to execute you. Fascinating development, but also interesting is that a lot of the right wing, or a growing number of the right wing, as we're about to show you, are saying, no, wait, I'm old enough to remember yesterday when we thought it was perfectly legal to bring a gun to a protest. So that's another split within the right. And now we're talking about gun control, we're talking about immigration, domestic policy. So that is a very interesting development.
So let's just be very clear off the bat. I know I said this once, I'm gonna say it again. Alex Pretti was a legal gun owner. The Minneapolis police chief confirmed that he had a permit to carry, plus he was disarmed prior to the agents shooting and killing him. So since that argument is out the window and we don't need to waste any time on that, Kristi Noem moved the goalpost and said that Pretti was actually breaking the law because he allegedly didn't have ID on him, which is technically true, but is it something that justifies pumping bullets into his body and killing him? No. So it's not considered a serious crime in Minnesota. Carrying a gun without an ID or permit card is a $25 petty misdemeanor ticket, not a call for execution. On top of which, the agents obviously did not know when they shot him in the back whether or not he had ID on him in the first place. So that's a little bit of an issue, isn't it, Kristi? And you also heard Noem and Kash Patel, FBI Director, unfortunately, claim earlier that peaceful protesters don't show up with guns. Now, Donald Trump made that same argument to the Wall Street Journal, saying, I don't like it when somebody goes to a protest and he's got a very powerful, fully loaded gun with 2 magazines loaded up with bullets. Now, Dana Lash, former spokesperson for the National Rifle Association, disagrees with that take and said as much on X, writing that you administration people need to watch yourselves with this language. Let's make something crystal clear. It is absolutely 100% legal to attend a protest armed. I've done it frequently. The issue is inserting yourself into a federal op. Either get the language right or stop doing press. But unsurprisingly, members of the Trump administration aren't the only people showing us all that they're massive hypocrites. Republican lawmakers and members of right-wing media are as well, and here are a few examples.
He came with a gun and stuck himself in the middle of a riot. That's like I-35 is a few miles from here. People are driving 85 miles an hour on it. And if I just stood on the side of the road and just ran out in front of cars, somebody hits me, it's not their fault.
There is an obligation on the part of somebody carrying a concealed weapon, whether properly permitted or not, but especially when properly permitted. You need to use reasonable judgment and you need to follow the law. The Second Amendment does not come without some responsibility. So shame on that individual for creating the very consequences that ultimately cost him his life, unfortunately.
Don't let the left kid you with this, that this is just a normal protest where people are peacefully protesting. No, it's not. Peaceful protesters don't have 9mm weapons with 2 extra magazines.
Unbelievable, absolutely. What's particularly unbelievable about that compilation that we just showed you guys is that it started with Alex Jones, the guy who lied about Sandy Hook being a false flag by the government so they can steal your guns. And here he is making an argument that provides cover for the Trump administration as they're claiming that this public execution was justified because Pretti was in possession of a legal gun that he never even brandished.
Why don't they just say it? If you're a right winger, you can show up with a gun. You can shoot it. Like if you're Kyle Rittenhouse, you can shoot a guy throwing a plastic bag at you. If you're, the guy who Zimmerman who killed Trayvon Martin, he's got Skittles and I could just murder him, and it's all good as long as you're a right winger. Have a gun, kill anyone you like. Oh, you're on the left. How dare you have a gun? What do you think the Constitution applies to every American citizen? Yeah, that's what it does. If you don't like it, then take away the Second Amendment. But there's nothing in the Constitution that says only the right wing can have guns and the left wing can't have guns. So, and by the way, a lot of times the left wing, and I'm not in this group because I'm for very significant gun control, but there was a lot of people on the left who own guns who were like, we got guns too.
Yeah.
And at the time, the right wing's like, okay, attaboy, I don't mind. Now, you brought your gun and you didn't use it and you had every right to carry it. Terrorist! Kill the guy with the gun! Come on. You never meant any of it.
Yeah, Pretti didn't do anything illegal. Okay, he had the right to be there. He had the right to protest. In the video, you don't even see him protesting. You see him filming with his phone, which really upsets these militarized federal agents who don't want any accountability for their actions. So, I've seen now countless videos of ordinary people just standing there holding phones, not intervening, not getting in the middle of a official operation by Border Patrol agents or ICE, and they get knocked down to the ground. ICE snatches their phones. Yeah. We're okay with that?
No, the guys pretending to be in favor of the Second Amendment like Alex Jones, it turns out they're bigger gun control advocates than I am. Because I don't think that if you show up somewhere with a gun that you should be executed.
Yeah.
Even if you show up to a protest with a gun, I don't think you should be executed. But apparently the right wing, or at least some portions of the right, the people who lied to you and said they were in favor of the Second Amendment go, no, how dare you? If you show up to protest the police state, and the police are wearing masks and they have no badges and they're are running basically a tyrannical government. They're putting their boot on your neck, and you even possess the gun at any point, you should be executed. Okay, then you never believed in the Second Amendment. So shut up forever about the Second Amendment. You're for much bigger gun control than I am.
Matt Walsh from the Daily Israel Wire says, if you dress up in your militia costume, let's pause.
Oh my God.
Let's pause. Dress up in your militia costume. I'm sorry, he was wearing a baseball cap and ordinary clothes. What's the militia costume, Matt?
No, Anna.
You little coward. Anyway, go ahead.
No, Anna, it's worse than what you're saying. He's making fun of like people who used to say they're gonna fight the government in the woods in their militia outfits. I used to make fun of guys like that, right? So now Matt Walsh has become apparently on gun rights a super lib. so far to the left. He's like, oh, what are you gonna show up in your militia costume and fight the police state? You won't fight the police state. The police state will murder you and take away your gun. Actually, take away your gun first, then murder you. What happened to Second Amendment, Matt? Now you're making fun of those people? Okay, and of course, I mean, you said that reference to Israel. In Israel, they do take away all your guns, and then if you criticize the government, they call you a terrorist if you're a Palestinian, and then they murder you.
If you dress up in your militia costume, arm yourself, then go out into the street with the express intent of interfering with law enforcement, and then fight back when they try to arrest you, and then you end up dead, you only have yourself to blame for that whole series of deliberate and insanely idiotic decisions. Did you feel that way about Ashley Babbitt? Do you feel that way about the anti-government militias in this country? You know?
Yeah.
Did you speak out against them? You didn't, right? Because you're a pathetic coward who does nothing more than engage in toxic, divisive rhetoric to divide the country. I mean, what has Matt Walsh contributed to this country other than garbage? But anyway, there's more.
Just real quick, Anna. So he says, if you express intent of interfering with law enforcement, well, what was all that talk about? You need the Second Amendment to stand up to a tyrannical government. I would imagine if you're standing up to a tyrannical government with weapons, that you would have an express intent of interfering with law enforcement.
Yeah.
So make up your mind, which one is it?
Well, he's not a person who's driven by values or morals or principles. How do I know that? Well, here's how I know that. This is the same guy who declared that Kyle Rittenhouse is a hero for showing up to a protest with an AR-15 style rifle.
Of course.
Yeah, Kyle Rittenhouse is a hero. There he is. The definition of pathetic, that's what he is. Okay. Jack Posobiec had a hilarious note on his X post in which he wrote, those of us who have legal carry permits know that it comes with certain requirements state by state. Having your permit and ID on you are basic stuff. No ID, that's an illegal carry. Lawful gun owners know all this and we practice it every day. So the note, as you can read, says, it's a quote from Jack Posobiec dating back to June of 2022. I don't know who needs to hear this, but all gun laws are unconstitutional.
Now he's saying, well, did you have your papers? Because if you didn't have your papers and all your T's are not crossed and I's are not dotted.
Execution.
Execution, this government gets to execute you.
Yeah, these people are dishonest. And they are a detriment to this country.
And Anna made a great point earlier in the show. They didn't check his papers before they killed him.
Right. They did disarm him before they killed him, though.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then you have Bill Asaley, who used to be a lawmaker, a state lawmaker here in California. He's now a prosecutor. He's saying, if you approach law enforcement with a gun, there is a high likelihood they will be legally justified in shooting you. He didn't brandish his gun. He didn't take his gun out of the holster. He didn't do anything threatening with said legal firearm that he had in a holster. But here you have individuals who are supposed to be serving the American people, justifying the slaughter of American people. So that was, by the way, so egregious that multiple gun rights groups spoke out against it. The NRA called Bill Asaley's statement dangerous and wrong. Gun owners of America even weighed in, arguing that federal agents are not highly likely to be legally justified in shooting concealed carry licensees who approach while lawfully carrying a firearm. The Second Amendment protects Americans' right to bear arms while protesting, a right the federal government must not infringe upon. Thomas Massey weighed in, and he has remained principled on a number of matters. He says, in response to Bill Asaley, carrying a firearm is not a death sentence. It's a constitutionally protected God-given right. And if you don't understand this, you have no business in law enforcement or government. And I agree with that. Just want to remind you all of some of the other armed individuals who were celebrated by the right wing, even as they were bearing arms amid protests. You have Patricia and Mark McCloskey, who brought weapons to a protest. They came outside of their homes with these firearms and pointed them at BLM protesters back in 2020. And you all know about Kyle Rittenhouse as well. So.
Yeah, silver lining here though, Anna. So you've got the usual ghouls and gobblers in Matt Walsh, Kash Patel, and the government, right? But here we are on a domestic policy issue, one that a lot of folks care about, immigration, one that animates the entire right wing and almost everybody who voted for Trump. And there's tons of dissent even on this issue. And look, for me, I think that they shouldn't kill him whether he has a gun or doesn't have a gun. And there's a little bit of irony here that some of the right wing are supporting him more because he did have a gun. And I think that that's kind of ironic. But on the other hand, I get why, because they then empathize with him more because they think there, but for the grace of God go I, right? And so I'll take it either way. And as usual, guys like Thomas Massie, I don't agree with him on the Second Amendment. I don't agree with him on gun control, but at least the brother is principled and he stays consistent. That's not too much to ask for.
That's exactly right. And look, let me just say, gun advocates just accomplished something huge in that the Supreme Court ruled that states like California that make it impossible to get a concealed carry permit are infringing on Americans' constitutional right. So after securing that victory, which allows people like me who might be interested in having a concealed carry permit, I'll never bring it to work, don't worry. All of a sudden, okay, even if I do it legally, even if I have the permit, I'm now putting myself in danger because if some law enforcement official thinks that I'm maybe a little bit of a threat, they can gun me down and you'll have I don't wanna say half the country, but you'll have a significant portion of the country justifying it, even though I didn't do anything wrong. That's crazy.
Yeah, that is absolutely crazy.
So that's where we're at. Anyway, all right, we gotta take our break. So when we come back, really interesting statements coming from individuals who once supported Trump, individuals who still support Trump on this matter. We've got Marjorie Taylor Greene, Tucker Carlson, and more. Don't miss it. Can't wait to share the story with you.
Damn it, they failed us. And if you're not angry about that, Michael, and any of you out there, then you're damn wrong, because you should be angry. Young Turks.
It was genuine. He was mad.
Cenk Uygur, known online as one of the Young Turks, isn't afraid to throw some punches.
3, 2, 1, fade up.
Cenk the Turk Uygur.
What kind of TV station is this? The whole point is for me to yell and scream and tell you what I think.
It was right out of like Wayne's World.
This guy on this little rinky-dink website is speaking truth to power.
We've been averaging 600,000 views a day, beating most of the cable shows in America.
We're the largest online news show in the world.
We're celebrating our 1 billionth view.
Television, we're coming.
More politics ahead with Cenk Uygur.
He knew that the MSNBC opportunity was an experiment.
And fill-in hosts beat CNN and headline news combined. At some point, they want to give me a show.
Every single year, that comes out of our paycheck. We put it in, and you're saying we were suckers.
When you, as a host, tells someone you're interviewing to shut up, that's going to raise a red flag.
That guy needed a tall glass of shut-up juice.
If President Obama's doing the wrong thing, I'm not going to tell you that he's doing the right thing so I can, quote, support him.
He says to me, "You won't believe the meeting that I just had."
The head of MSNBC talked to me.
And they want him off the air.
Cenk took an incredible risk.
We're supposed to challenge the government. That's the role of the media.
The Democrats and the Republicans are here to screw you. And who on the air is saying it?
I wouldn't have done what he did.
That if I'm going to be a talk show host, I should be the biggest talk show host in the country. I don't think anyone else does it better. I don't think anyone's even close.
Before you know it, I'll be back on your TV doing a national show. I guarantee it.
Magic. It's showtime. And say 45 minutes. I'm hosting today. Now, I know what you're thinking, JR, your face is already perfect, but you know what? I still need to apply some makeup. I went through this process, right? A few years ago. When I realized that I was gonna have to wear makeup on the show, I had to go through like finding out what my undertones were. You guys know what those are? I got my MAC Cosmetics. It says SPF 15 foundation, broad spectrum. But apparently what I have is red undertones, and I think pores are not supposed to be seen. I need all these things to be confirmed for me. These sponge things don't work for me. You gotta use your hands. At least I did. That's how the magic really happens. So we're gonna go through a tutorial. How to make the magic happen from beautiful to beautifuler. Let's go. I've already been moisturized. That's the first thing. But moisturization already happened. We go raw. All hands. Pick up. Couple streaks. This is the guy we were putting on makeup. We got dots. There's some shiny points that generally happen. First of all, here we go. You dust here. I'm putting way too much, but you dust. Oh, get the excess off. You don't want chunky powder. There's like a T-zone, I think, right? Mine is a double T-zone. Because I went middle and another cross. Make sure your nose isn't all shiny. People get on you for it. They'll say, that's not a good point you made on there, JR. Your nose is shiny. You guys are picky like that sometimes. I think that's about it, fellas and ladies. See you guys next time. Bitsies.
Tucker Carlson, a terrible friend.
That's horrifying. That's horrifying.
All right, back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys. Also, a wise grip. Thank you for joining. They hit the join button below the video on YouTube. We really appreciate that. Look, guys, you could ring the bell. That's free, and that really helps. Takes about 2 seconds. But if you join, that is enormously helpful to a show that's trying to be independent and honest and serve all of you guys. And speaking of which, Titan of Olympus and Eddie Jameson, thank you so much for gifting 5 memberships on YouTube, and Drew Wilson for gifting 20. So you guys are amazing. We love you for it. Let's do more news.
All right, so this morning, Tucker Carlson slammed the Trump administration's crackdown on Minneapolis. Yeah, you heard that right. And he also called out the so-called conservatives who are conveniently forgetting about their support for the Second Amendment as they justify the execution of Alex Pretti by Border Patrol agents simply because he was in legal possession of a concealed firearm that he never brandished, that he never threatened anyone with. Now, before I get to the details of what Carlson said in his newsletter about this shooting, Cenk, your 2 cents.
Yeah, I'm super encouraged that now agreement has gone to domestic issues, not just issues of war, Epstein and Israel, but now we're getting some agreements on lower drug prices. Now, even on the core issue of immigration, not to say that we agree on immigration or we agree on ICE overall, but a police state executing American citizens in the streets is a thing that in the old days we would have just divided up into camps on, and that's still definitely happening to some degree. But here's Tucker Carlson, one of the leaders of the right wing, saying, no, I don't think this is a good idea. So a really interesting development.
So the headline for this newsletter is Alex Pretti's killing was perfect for America's ruling class.
Yes.
And in the piece, Carlson repeatedly calls out the unnecessary chaos that we've been seeing in Minneapolis. Minnesota's ICE situation has once again devolved into chaos. Enraged demonstrators took to the streets shortly after Pretti's death, prompting Tim Walz to deploy his National Guard. He did so for good reason. And by the way, there are some videos that I came across on social media showing National Guard, providing some of the demonstrators with donuts, and like, those are public servants. When Americans interact with the government, they want to know that the individuals who signed up to be public servants are actually working as public servants, not individuals looking to find any little excuse to execute them. Now, he also writes that regardless of your views on ICE or Donald Trump, it's clear that what's occurring in Minneapolis is completely out of control. Leaders in Washington and Minneapolis must do everything possible to lower the temperature. What took place in Minneapolis was a terrible story, and it never should have happened. So he later gets into the arguments that are being made by a lot of people on the right regarding Pretti's possession of a legal firearm. Before we get to that, Before we get to that though, Cenk, you had a reaction to the headline about how this is perfect for America's ruling class. Why do you agree with that?
Yeah, honestly, it's literally the same exact thing I said on Piers Morgan this morning. They wrote the newsletter before, but I hadn't read it. So it's an interesting, again, populist left, populist right going, guys, remember, they're gonna try to split us up. And because the only thing that could take on the establishment is a united left and right. And are your wages any higher? Are drug prices any lower? Housing prices any lower? And so the reality is they want to create division, hatred among us because there's a lot of energy on the right and the left. If they use it to address the people who actually rigged the system that's above you, they could actually win. But if they use the energy to attack each other, then that energy is wasted, and the powerful absolutely love it. And when you see this kind of American on American violence and chaos in the streets, the powerful are thinking, oh, exactly what we wanted. So don't feed into that.
Now, Trump has already made some changes in Minnesota, likely because he realizes that what's been happening on the streets of Minneapolis in particular has hurt public perception of his administration. So he has pulled Greg Bovino and some Border Patrol agents out of Minnesota. And we'll see if that does, in fact, lower the temperature. But later in this newsletter, Tucker Carlson addresses the conservatives who are abandoning their pro-Second Amendment principles in the wake of Alex Pretti's murder. Today he wrote that reactions have been so factional that supposedly pro-Second Amendment conservatives are suddenly saying that practicing concealed carry is some sort of crime. That's almost as crazy as exploiting Charlie Kirk's assassination to push hate speech laws. Republicans back the deportation forces and Democrats side with Pretti, even if doing so means abandoning the principles they purportedly hold near and dear. They mold their views based on tribalism, not values. But look, in the case of Pretti, I don't support Pretti because he was a Democrat. I support Pretti because he didn't do anything wrong. At least from everything we've seen, he didn't do anything specifically to justify his public execution by federal agents in broad daylight. And I think providing cover for that or defending that pulls this country in a very dark and dangerous place that we will all suffer from. All ordinary people will suffer from. If we greenlight a police state that allows masked federal agents to gun Americans down willy-nilly with no consequences, I don't know, I personally don't want to live in that country. That's a scary country to live in. Any thoughts, Cenk?
Yeah, just that, it's a super interesting newsletter. I read it, very conservative, but still principled and pro-American. And so it's worth reading in that sense. And you see these surprises all the time. And why is it a surprise? It's not a surprise given Tucker Carlson's actual positions. If you're in favor of the Second Amendment, this should not be surprising at all. That is the correct right-wing position, right? But it's surprising only because in the old days, you had Fox News and MSNBC, and they had to almost like, by law, at least the law and the rules and regulations passed by their executives, they had to fight. And they had to disagree on every single issue. But now we have a situation where, as you're seeing here, is, even if they think, I'm not in favor of Pretti or whatever it might be, they're like, yeah, but you do have a right to bring a gun. That's we've been saying that for 20, 50 years on the right. And you do have a right to protest the government, and they can't take away your First Amendment or your Second Amendment rights. That is a principled conservative position that happens to agree with, by the way, on the Second Amendment here, we're kind of agreeing with them. On almost every other issue, they have come in our direction, anti-war, anti-Israel, etc. So in this case, I'm not a big fan of the Second Amendment, but if we're applying the Second Amendment, then certainly you have a right to carry that weapon around, right?
Right.
And that is certainly the right-wing position.
That's right. All right, I actually want to move on to the next story. We got to take a break. After the break, we're going to come back and talk a little bit about the Trump administration hemorrhaging support among individuals who voted for him as a result of the ICE operations that have been taking place in Minnesota. We're also going to talk a little bit about what Marjorie Taylor Greene believes is the real agenda here. So come right back.
second social break here. But guys, I want to read you the last portion of Tucker Carlson's newsletter this morning. They said the corrupt establishment's best chance of survival is if Americans stop directing their rage at them and instead turn on each other, just like they're doing in the wake of Pretti's death. Americans must remember who the real enemy is. Even if Average Joe and Average Dave vehemently disagree about ICE, they're both victims of Washington's obsession with ignoring the people and serving the powerful. Want to create change? That's great. We do too. Just don't view your fellow American as the obstacle. Always look up. It's impossible to disagree with that. I mean, look at that. If we wind up having an actual alliance here and take on the establishment, sorry, but that'll be the greatest thing that ever happened, right? And I'm not saying it's already happened. There's a long road to go, right? But these are good beginnings, and I don't think it's a trick, guys. I think they genuinely mean it, and so I'm very happy to take yes for an answer on looking up, look up, look up, look up. That's where the power is. That's how you rig the rules. People without wealth or power have no ability to rig the rules. The rules have been rigged against all of us, and they don't give a damn if you're a Republican or a Democrat on the right or the left. They only care whether you have power or you don't. Okay, so now let's go to Super Chat. In Liberty and Guns We Trust said, I'm a libertarian. I would advise every single one of my fellow law-abiding Americans to purchase as many firearms as you can afford and stock up on bulk ammo. It's your God-given right, fellow Americans.
And please train if you haven't done any training on firearms, firearm safety. Please make sure that you have a safe and you keep it in the safe. If you have children especially, like be a responsible gun owner. It is a right, but be responsible with that right.
So in Liberty and Guns We Trust is a consistent viewer of ours. As you see, he's a libertarian and he's got guns in his handle, right? So I disagree with what he's saying. I don't want you to stock up on ammo and guns. I think that's a bad idea. But having said that, brother, again, like Massey and Tucker and others, way to be principled. That have been your principles all along. I don't have to agree with you. You don't have to agree with me on that. But you do have to be consistent, and you have been. So nice job on that. Dave L. Jones says, I remember conservative protesters entering the Michigan State House to aggressively object to COVID closures. What hypocrites. Yeah, should they have been all mowed down?
I remember defending those protesters, right?
It's almost as if we're consistent.
Yeah.
Okay, Felix DeLeon, thank you for the contribution through Super Chat. Citizen Resistor says, secret police backed up by a rogue government. It is our job as American citizens to resist this attempt at laying this framework for the sake of future generations. Cool, I totally agree with that. Coolho says Trump has solidified total power over us. No, brother, that's the good news. Not at all. He's backpedaling as we speak, as we've told you. So if he had solidified total power, we'd be completely screwed. He's trying, but look at this wonderful resistance against him.
It looks like the administration is trying to distance themselves from Stephen Miller. Now, this is super.
Oh my God.
I know, hold on, don't get too excited. Let's just wait and see. I don't want to get too excited. You know how I am. I'm very pessimistic about everything. So let's just wait and see.
That would be the greatest news of all time.
It really would. It really would.
Yeah. User Error says, if these ICE thugs keep getting no consequences, even cover for these shootings, then they'll only be encouraged to further violence. Exactly right. Super worried about that. Crimes have to have consequences. This was a crime. All right, back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys, and Dwayne Handy. Dwayne, thanks for hitting the join button below. We love you guys. Casper.
All right, we've got one more story on this shooting that happened in Minnesota over the weekend. Let's get right to it.
The White House has labeled the man who was killed in Minnesota as a domestic terrorist. Is that something you agree with? And have you seen any evidence to back up that claim?
When you perpetuate violence against a government because of ideological reasons and for reasons to resist and perpetuate violence, that is the definition of domestic terrorism. This individual who came with weapons and ammunition to stop a law enforcement operation of federal law enforcement officers committed an act of domestic terrorism. That's the facts.
The Trump administration is absolutely hemorrhaging support as they continue to make absolutely vile and untrue comments and statements to justify the murder of, or I should say the killing of Alex Pretti. Now, Alex Pretti was an observer who was filming Border Patrol agents in Minneapolis as they approached him, pushed a woman next to him to the ground, and then proceeded to disarm him and shoot him to death. Now, he was in legal possession of a firearm. He had a permit to carry a concealed weapon. He never brandished the weapon. He never threatened anyone with it. So everything you just heard there from Kristi Noem was meant to manufacture consent for the public execution of an American citizen who never brandished a gun. And according to former Trump devotee Marjorie Greene, this all was meant to push Americans into a civil war. Cenk, your 2 cents.
Here we go again. Marjorie Taylor Greene coming out largely on our side.
Spitting bars.
It's amazing. Wait till you see her quotes on it. And also we're gonna share the polling with you guys. Not looking good for Trump. That's why he's in the middle of a backpedal as we speak.
So in a lengthy statement on X this morning, former Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, who was at one time a supporter of Trump but no longer, reiterated her support for enforcing our immigration laws. And it's true, you can be in favor of enforcing our immigration laws while simultaneously criticizing the Trump administration for how they have gone about it. And that's what she did here. She pleaded with Trump supporters to open their eyes, saying that legally carrying a firearm is not the same as brandishing a firearm. I support Americans' First and Fourth Amendment rights. There is nothing wrong with legally, peacefully protesting and videoing, meaning videoing ICE agents or Border Patrol agents or law enforcement. You're allowed to do that. It is your right as an American. Now, Greene also flipped the script and urged Republicans to question what they would do if this happened to the right under Biden. Imagine if one of our MAGA independent journalists or even just a MAGA supporter stood in the street outside a J6er's house while Biden's FBI carried out a law enforcement operation, home invasion, and arrest. The Biden's FBI goes to the MAGA guy videoing it all and shoves a woman with him to the ground and sprays them with bear spray, then throws the MAGA guy to the ground as MAGA guy was trying to help the woman off the ground. Then Biden's FBI beats MAGA guy on the ground, disarms MAGA guy, and then shoots him dead. What would have been our reaction? And I think we know what their reaction would be. They would be furious, just as any sane person who saw the videos of the Alex Pretti shooting are furious. Anyone who's actually principled and moral would look at that and be furious about it. And I'm really happy that Marjorie Taylor Greene is willing to call this out.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much I'm encouraged by here. So first, the true right, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Tucker Carlson, etc., who are being principled conservatives, came out and agreed on Epstein files. Now you think, what do you mean? The right wing was in favor of the releasing the Epstein files, arguably even more than the left wing. So that's just being consistent. Exactly, because in the past, both sides would flip their positions completely the minute they got into power, right? So in Trump's first term, whenever Trump said something, it said jump, they'd say how high, and it didn't matter how absurd it was. Almost all the right wing would immediately copy what he was saying, even if they thought it was totally wrong. But in the case of the Epstein files, he's like, okay, now we bury them, right? Everybody change your positions. And they're like, wait, what? No, I'm not gonna change my position. And that was a really important moment in American history, because that was when the break began. Then breaks started happening all over the place. And they're not breaking against their policies. They're breaking against a so-called leader who's actually betraying their policies.
Right.
So like First Amendment's another great example. Trump ran on freedom of speech. Freedom of speech, right? And then he turns around and he goes, okay, now everybody complaining about Israel, shut up. Otherwise I'll have you arrested, deported, denaturalized, all these different things. And again, the right wing that are the true right are like, wait, we were in favor of freedom of speech. I could remember it. It was like only like 2 days ago, right?
Yeah.
And so they're sticking with that. Now on this one, now we're at government tyranny. And they're like, wait a minute, the government's shooting you just because you have a gun?
A legal weapon, yeah.
A legal weapon? That's government tyranny. Guys en masse, etc. This is getting sketchy. And then finally, for now, I love that she's doing shoe on the other foot. I mean, how many times have I done shoe on the other foot? And guys, the reason why that's so important is because it breaks the cycle of hatred. It creates a tiny bit of empathy. So you can go, oh, right. Wait a minute, if it was a Biden government shooting a legal gun owner who was a right-winger protesting COVID, I'd be irate, I'd be super mad. By the way, we also do that on the other side. We tell Democrats, now imagine if Trump's babbling and we defeated Medicare, although he might brag about that. We'd be like, hey, that guy looks senile, right?
I mean,
and
that does
Biden
happen,
looks
though.
senile.
Yeah, that does happen.
Right?
I mean, look, that's actually a really great example, right? You see a lot of people on the left, broad left, I'm not saying leftist, but just Democratic voters who provided cover for Biden when he clearly was lying to the American people about his the state of his health, let's just put it that way. But then at the same time, they attack Trump over his senile behavior.
Right.
And it's like, you gotta be consistent on this, because at the end of the day, what matters is whether or not the American people in general, regardless of where they are on the political spectrum, are actually being served by our public servants. Are they actually doing what's right for the American people, regardless of what their political identity happens to be?
Yeah, one more really important thing about that, guys. So if you were a Democrat who couldn't see that Biden had become, some form of dementia, senility, etc., I get why, because that's all you heard from your media sources. So it's really hard to see straight. So if you were in that camp, now we were not in that camp, but that's okay, that's okay. If you were in that camp, I'm asking you to realize why sometimes people on the right have a similar problem where you go, well, they sound crazy, because their media sources are telling them things that are demonstrably wrong, but they don't know that. Just like you couldn't tell that Biden was losing it, that he was too old, they can't tell all these different things that we see clearly. So that's why online media is making an enormous difference. Before Fox News and MSNBC were assembly lines of talking points.
You drive me crazy with this point, because Cenk, I get it. Mainstream media, they've served as gatekeepers and they all were in line with the same BS messaging. I get that argument, but like, part of the problem right now is algorithms keep us in our bubbles, right? So right-wing media watchers, they're in a right-wing bubble. Left-wing media people, or people who watch left-wing media, they're in a bubble. You literally have to go out of your way, as I do, to make sure that you're getting a full picture. So as much as I love independent media, as much as I agree that it's overall a good thing that the internet has allowed the news industry to be flooded with different options for people, these tech algorithms are really not great for us.
So Anna, you're right about the algorithms, but the nuance here, and it's super important, is yes, but in the past there was only 2 bubbles. And the bubbles were also always meant to be 100% in opposition. Now there's hundreds of bubbles.
No, and there's still 2 bubbles.
No, there isn't. No way. There's the Young Turks. There's Tucker Carlson. Wait a minute. There's Mark Levin. There's Joe Rogan. Just take those 4, but I can give you 40 more. We all say different things, and sometimes now Tucker and us are agreeing, right? But the guy who used to watch Mark Levin and Tucker on Fox News say relatively the same things. Now he's got to use his mind and decide which bubble to go in.
Okay,
right?
That's fair. That's fair. Okay, so this is the really relevant part of what Marjorie Taylor Greene had to say, though, and I think she's making a good point here. And this is what I'm really worried about. Both sides need to take off their. Let me start that again. Both sides need to take off their political blinders. You are all being incited into civil war, yet none of it solves any of the real problems that we all face, and tragically, people are dying.
I mean, see, that's such a great example, right? Before, Fox News would have said, no, it's great, you shoot him in the head, etc., and that would have been the entire right-wing position. Now, we just showed you in back-to-back stories, in fact, 3 back-to-back, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Tucker Carlson, Tom Massey, let alone many, many others, but those 3, as usual, being the stalwarts, all saying the same thing I said independently, not knowing their positions. They didn't know my position. The same thing I said on Piers Morgan this morning, which is they're looking to divide you. Americans, stay together, stay consistent, and understand that your opponents are not on your left or your right, they're above you. Fight up.
Now look, there was a national poll from the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, and that poll recently showed that 57% of Americans believe that the US is on a path to a civil war. That is terrifying, and I think we're starting to see like the beginning, signs of that in places like Minnesota. So I am worried about that. And now you have Marjorie Taylor Greene saying, yeah, you guys are being incited into a civil war. And even experts are saying that we're headed down that path right now, including Claire Finkelstein, who's a professor of law and philosophy at the University of Pennsylvania. So she says, she cites an exercise that she was part of. So she basically ran a simulation back in 2024. So that's what she's citing here in the excerpts I'm about to read you. In that exercise, a president carried out a highly unpopular law enforcement operation in Philadelphia and attempted to federalize Pennsylvania's National Guard. When the governor resisted and the Guard remained loyal to the state, the president deployed active duty troops, resulting in an armed conflict between state and federal forces. The core danger we identified is now emerging, a violent confrontation between state and federal military forces in a major American city. While our hypothetical scenario picked a different city and a slightly different sequence of events, the conclusions we reached about the possibility of green on green violence are directly applicable to the current situation. So hopefully things don't continue to escalate, and there are already some positive signs indicating that Trump is trying to de-escalate the situation after he had a phone call with Governor Tim Walz of Minnesota. So Greg Bovino, who was overseeing Border Patrol operations, has been pulled out of Minnesota. There are some reports indicating that he might get fired, but it's too soon to confirm anything like that. So take that with a grain of salt. Border Patrol agents have also been pulled out of Minnesota. So it looks like he's looking to de-escalate, and I'm hoping he does go in that direction.
One quick thing about Marjorie Taylor Greene before we do the polls, because the polls are important. So some of you might be tempted to say, well, wait a minute, just a couple of months ago, wasn't Marjorie Taylor Greene talking about a national divorce? She was, and I said at the time, that's a terrible idea, I don't agree with that. And now she's turning around and saying, no, don't do civil war, don't be at each other's throats. So there's two potential reactions to that. You're inconsistent and you need to apologize for your earlier positions. Or the other way is, oh great, that's awesome. You've now come to the right conclusion. Love to have you here.
Not only that, I mean, guys, she had that reaction immediately following the assassination of Charlie Kirk, right? So emotions are gonna fly high after someone on your side gets assassinated, and the initial statements coming from the Trump administration is that a leftist did it.
Yeah, no, I get it.
I'm not justifying what she said in wanting a national divorce to happen. I'm just saying, like, it's not like that came out of nowhere and she just hates the left and wants to separate.
No, I understand, but my point is, even if you hated that position, which I didn't agree with that position,
right.
Once she's come to the correct position, the position that we agree with, then just say, wonderful, happy to have you here. You don't have to further insult people after they've already come towards you. I know it's a revolutionary thought, and a lot of folks don't agree with me on that, but say take yes for an answer.
Especially if you want to win.
Yeah.
That's how you win. But anyway, okay. Let's talk a little bit about public perception toward the Trump administration and its immigration policies. So Harry Enton has updated the American people on how the Trump administration is being perceived by Americans, especially as it pertains to some of these ICE and Border Patrol operations. Now, let's start off with the first video. We're gonna get a little sense of how Trump is doing.
ICE's net approval rating during Trump's term. You go back to term number 1. Look, it's pretty even at 0 points. You go to June 2025, right? That was when all that stuff was going on in Los Angeles. They dropped down. Look at this, minus 17 points, way in the basement. But then after Minneapolis, it's even lower, minus 27 points on the net approval rating.
And as you can see, that's based on an average of polls coming from Fox News, Quinnipiac, Siena College. And so it gives you a more comprehensive or robust sense of how Americans feel about ICE. And I think that's pretty accurate considering the fact that most Americans don't want to see militarized federal agents in masks in their neighborhoods. They don't like that.
Yeah, so now you see Trump be playing nice with Tim Walz, potentially replacing Noam with Homan, at least in Minnesota, and how they're dealing with it. He pulled bovine disease, as Anna explained to you, whoever that guy's name is, Border Patrol guy.
Bovino.
Yeah, bovine disease. And so
it's unfair to cows. But
okay, sure. But why is he doing that? Because of minus 27 in the polls. When you get to minus 27, that's when you go backpedal, 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 and he's trying to get the hell out of there, which is great. I'm glad he's backpedaling. I don't want him to dig in further, but also great job, American people. You were united in saying, we don't want this.
That's right. All right, let's go to one more video here. I'm gonna go to D4 actually, because this is on Kristi Noem's approval rating. She is, of course, the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security.
In July of 2025, it was minus 11 points. It's actually gotten more unpopular now at minus 16 points. I looked at every single poll that has been conducted on Kristi Noem's popularity. Every single one, the net approval rating has been negative. ICE is negative, DHS is negative. As I said at the top, Kate, this has been an absolute political disaster for the President of the United States.
That's right. And look, this is why I can totally understand being furious with the Trump administration. I'm furious with the Trump administration. But what you just saw in that video is how the American people feel about the Trump administration. So when you're feeling angry about what's happening under a Republican administration, don't take that anger out on Republican voters, because chances are that there are plenty of Republican voters out there who don't agree with what is happening. And on top of that, ordinary people don't have power in this country, right? So direct your ire and think about your safe, legal strategy in fighting back when it comes to people who actually have the power.
Yeah, so to that point real quick, I think even more accurate than saying Republican voters is Trump voters, because a lot of independents also voted for Trump.
Yes.
And those are the guys we have to win back most. And good news, we kind of already have. The only thing is there's nothing that Democratic leadership can't screw up. That's for the elections. But for now, guys, the country's getting united in opposition to Trump's positions. That's great. Look, the reason I voted against Trump is because I knew that he was gonna do this and that it was not a good idea. Okay, a lot of people didn't see that coming, but now they see that it has arrived. And that is super important. So let's all get together and turn around. And by the way, what the Democrats should do is don't give them another corporate Democrat, because then you're gonna make this a real contest in 26 and 28. Give them someone who's populist left with super popular positions that the American people want, and that serves the average American. Then you will win these elections easily. Just please don't go back in a corporate direction.
Well, good luck with that. We got to take our final break. When we come back, we got to talk about the Ted Cruz audio leak, because he's actually really not a fan of Trump or JD Vance, and he tells his donors something completely different. So we've got that story and more. Come right back.
Bow chickie wow wow going down.
I love cows.
All right, let's go to Super Chat. November 1775 or Nov 1775, Jim wrote in, I like my TYT bubble. That's funny. But look, I think we're the only show that says, no, go verify what we're saying, or among the few shows. Make sure that you're not in a bubble. Go get data and facts, and you'll see, as a lot of the AI and the chats and the groks and whatever the hell, etc., all those things are confirming what we're saying. Why? Because we bothered to look it up, because we're actually trying to do news, right?
So The Atlantic is reporting Greg Bovino has been removed from his role as Border Patrol Commander at Large and will return to his former post in California, where he's expected to retire soon, according to a DHS official and 2 people familiar with the change.
That's huge, guys.
I really hope we keep going in this direction. I just do not want us to descend into the type of country that allows the federal government to just shoot and kill American citizens willy-nilly with no consequences.
I think that they're gonna build a statue of Alex Pretti. And I think that he is in some ways will be considered a fighter for freedom. And guys, remember, it wasn't just that he was protesting ICE. What did he do? He looked to help that woman that ICE had knocked down or Border Patrol had knocked down.
Yeah, by the way, what's the justification for ICE doing that? For knocking that woman down?
And bear spraying her.
Yeah.
Because my guess is she had said something that hurt their feelings.
Maybe.
And by the way, guys,
that doesn't justify doing that to her.
Yeah, no, that's my point. As I said with Renee Good, I'll say it in this case too. It's not a manly thing to attack women, to shoot women in the head, to push women, to pepper spray women because they hurt your feelings. That's actually a super weak thing to do.
Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem and her close advisor Corey Lewandowski, who were Bovino's biggest backers at DHS, are also at risk of losing their jobs, 2 of the people told me.
Oh wow, wait, say the names again.
This is The Atlantic. The Atlantic is reporting this, that Kristi Noem and her close advisor Corey Lewandowski, who were Bovino's.
Lewandowski, right, okay. Yeah. So the worst kept secret in Washington is that they're lovers. And there's a lot of people who already hate Lewandowski, so that's probably hurting Noem. I want to go to this comment because it's a dissent. Mark Keister wrote in our super chat, please stop your right-wing cuddling. Your anti-war buddy Tucker was licking Trump's boots this month, supporting the attack on Venezuela. No, he didn't. Why bother? You won't read this critical feedback from a 10-year member. Oh, I just read it. Okay, so Mark, here's the situation. Look, nothing but love, brother. You're mad at me, no problem. You think I'm cuddling them, no problem. Okay, just see how it goes. And today you're saying, oh, my buddy Tucker sucks, when he's agreeing with us on this issue. Did you ever think that Tucker Carlson would agree with us on an issue like this? But I know what you're saying, not good enough. No, Cenk, you don't hate them enough. I want you to hate them more. Sorry, I'm not gonna do it. And I think, Mark, you're gonna turn around one day and go, maybe the hate wasn't a good idea. Maybe we're on the left and we're on the side of actually being of love and uniting people and being one country, etc. But I got no bad feelings. It is what it is. It's okay, you have a different opinion.
Tucker Carlson, a terrible friend.
That's horrifying.
All right, back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys. Look, guys, there's a billion comments I wish I could read. We got to do this last story, and then afterwards I'm going to interview Ken Klippenstein. He has some amazing stories he broke, including DHS keeping a list of domestic terrorists. So don't miss that interview. It's at the top of the hour, but we got more news for you now.
All right, so this is entirely different from everything we've been talking about, but I just couldn't resist talking about this story. So let's get into it. Senator Ted Cruz was caught trashing Donald Trump and JD Vance while speaking to his donors in a secret recording that was obtained by Axios. Now, Cruz slammed Trump's tariff policies and even went after JD Vance and says that he would fire staffers if they repeat something that Trump is in favor of. He also called JD Vance a pawn of Tucker Carlson, which I think is interesting. But Cenk, what are your initial thoughts?
Okay, 2 cents here. One is, isn't it amazing how all these greasy politicians say something completely different off air than they do on air?
It's not amazing. It's the most expected thing imaginable. It's the most usual thing possible.
So you're going to see more of that here, and especially from Ted Cruz, not surprising, the king of slime. But the second thing is the JD Vance angle. Why now all of a sudden I'm starting to see Israel First be discomforted by JD Vance.
No,
but
don't
hold
buy
on,
it.
hold
It's a
on,
lie.
hold on,
It's a
hold
lie.
on. That's why I'm saying
he's a little bitch boy for Israel.
No, I got you, but that's why it's interesting. So what in the world is going on with JD Vance?
He's a bitch boy for Israel.
Okay, let's do this.
They're all lying. Don't let anyone launder JD Vance's reputation as some isolationist or anti-war person. He's not, okay? He's a puppet of Peter Thiel, Palantir, all of the people who are profiting off of the mass slaughter campaign in Gaza. So don't make that mistake. We'll get to that in a minute.
I have a theory on that, but go ahead.
Okay, my theory is everyone's lying about him being an isolationist. Okay, with that in mind, the recordings, which are nearly 10 minutes long in total, were given to Axios by an anonymous Republican source. Now, the conversations allegedly took place in mid-2025, and they provided an unvarnished look at how Ted Cruz is positioning himself as a traditional free trade, pro-interventionist Republican in the lead up to 2028. Homeboy thinks he's gonna run for president again.
Oh yeah, he's definitely gonna run.
Hilarious.
And he's going and he's groveling to Israel first, and he's gonna collect an enormous amount of money. And I'm gonna love seeing it wasted.
So in one part of the recordings, Cruz recounted an explosive conversation he had with Trump regarding his tariff policies. And so he shares this with the group of donors, saying, he tells them that after Trump introduced the tariffs in early April 2025, Cruz and a few other senators had a call with Trump in which they urged him to stand down. Cruz says the lengthy call, which stretched past midnight, did not go well, and that Trump was yelling and cursing. Trump was in a bad mood. I've been in conversations where he was very happy. This was not one of them. And according to Axios, Cruz says he told Trump, by the way, I don't believe that Cruz is the tough guy he's making himself out to be in front of his donors, but this is what he told donors he said to Trump. Mr. President, if we get to November of 2026 and people's 401ks are down 30% and prices are up 10 to 20% at the supermarket, we're going to go into election day, face a bloodbath. You're going to lose the House, you're going to lose the Senate, you're going to spend the next 2 years being impeached every single week. To which Trump allegedly responded with a simple, F you, Ted. Does anyone really believe that Ted Cruz has the cojones to push back against Trump on literally anything? Literally anything, because I don't believe it. So he is telling his donors who probably hate Trump's tariff policy, oh, but I'm fighting for you. I told Trump what's what. But you didn't do that. I don't believe it for a second.
That's interesting. I hadn't even thought about that. Because it sounds believable, like Cruz would kiss the ass of his donors, and his donors were not happy with Trump's tariffs, etc. But I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
He might have got the best of both worlds when he's on the call with Trump. He can say, "Oh, Daddy, it's okay, Daddy. I'm on your side, Daddy. Where's your boots, Daddy? I want to clean them." And then he gets on the phone with the donors and he's like, "Oh my God, all my mommies and daddies are here." So, and what's interesting about the donor calls, guys, by the way, also on the Democratic side, there's two issues they are super consistent on, never waver from, corporate Democrat or corporate Republican. One is, we will serve corporate rule with complete loyalty. Chamber of Commerce, whatever you need, business interests, giant multinational corporations, I will screw over the average American 1,000 times to help you. And the second one, of course, is Israel. Oh, we serve almighty Israel. Screw America, what do you need? We'll take it from the stupid Americans that we've tricked into believing that we're their representatives and give it all to you. As long as you keep the good old bribes coming, and that's what, this is Ted Cruz begging for bribes.
That's exactly right. That's why I think he's just playing both sides. And I don't believe for a second he had this like, ooh, heated conversation with Trump. And during part of the conversation, Cruz jokingly added that if any of his staffers ever referred to Trump's unveiling of tariffs as Liberation Day, they'd be fired right there on the spot. This guy is such a slimy politician. Cruz also told donors about battling the White House to accept a trade agreement with India. When a donor asks who in the administration is resistant to reaching such accords, Cruz mentions White House economic advisor Peter Navarro, which is believable, Vance, and sometimes Trump. Okay, so let's get to Cruz and how he goes after JD Vance in particular, because he didn't just trash Donald Trump, he brought up Vance a lot, according to Axios. He accused Vance of advancing Tucker Carlson's anti-interventionist foreign policies. He said, quote, Tucker created JD, JD is Tucker's protege, and they are one and the same. Okay. What I know without a shadow of a doubt is that Peter Thiel created JD Vance. Peter Thiel is a Zionist. There has never been any real indication from JD Vance to prove to me that he is anti-war or anti-interventionist. I don't know where this comes from. I don't know who made this up, and I don't know why it catches on. But JD Vance will bow his head and do as he's told if he becomes the next president. I guarantee it. I would literally bet everything I own, including the shirt off my own back, on that. So like, where does that come from?
People.
Okay, well, I'd put another shirt on, but okay. You get what I'm saying? Like, where did it come from? Where's the evidence? I want to see something substantive that proves to me that JD Vance wouldn't be the same warmonger as everyone else in the Trump administration right now.
So what they are doing, and this gets to my JD Vance theory, is every time there's a new bombing, they make sure to leak that JD Vance was hesitant, right?
Oh, wow, hesitant, woo.
He gave a note of caution.
Oh, note of caution.
Okay, so now why are they doing that? They're setting that up so that after the wars turn into disasters and ICE in the streets turn into disaster, etc., they can say, no, remember that Axios report by Barack Ravid saying that JD Vance was a slightly hesitant?
Yeah.
So now we need you to fall for this trick again, okay? And so, look, they do this every freaking time, again on both sides, but But we saw JD Vance in the Petri dish.
Yep.
We saw when he was polling at 1% and Peter Thiel came in and squeezed a tube full of $10 million into that Petri dish.
Yep.
And then Vance blossomed, etc. So if there is a secret plan and he's actually not pro-Israel and not this and not that and not pro-corporate rule, that's impossible. Totally impossible. I mean, you're not gonna hand the country over to Silicon Valley? Of course you are.
I mean,
that's your daddy and mommy, right? But okay, if you have a secret plan, brother, no. Don't tell me 3 years later, tell me now, okay? Or, I get some political machinations after the midterm, I don't know. But what I'm not going to accept is, after everything is said and done and you were vice president, then you come and go, I secretly disagreed with everything Trump did.
Yeah,
no way.
Kick rocks, don't believe you at all. And in fact, I mean, look, which industry, aside from defense contractors, the typical defense contractors like Boeing, Raytheon, blah, blah, which other industry or sector of the economy has profited handsomely off the slaughter campaign that Israel has carried out in Gaza?
The defense industry.
The tech companies.
And the tech companies.
Right?
Look.
And Vance is a product, a creation of a big player in the tech industry, Peter Thiel.
Palantir is the surveillance state. And Palantir talked about how they, basically experimented in Gaza.
Yep.
And so they'd like to bring that Frankenstein over here. No, thank you. No, thank you. I mean, JD Vance, if he wants to prove that he's not in the pocket of those guys, good news, he's got a lot of power. He's the vice president of the United States of America, arguably the second most powerful person on earth. So are you gonna do anything about it? If you don't, I have a very tall glass of shut up juice waiting for you in 2028.
That's right. Yeah, all I've seen from JD Vance so far is his regurgitating and parroting of everything that the Trump administration has been doing and getting heat for. So when it comes to Venezuela, right? Oh, anti-interventionist JD Vance really spoke out against that, right?
No, he didn't.
Except he didn't. Yeah.
But he was slightly hesitant, according to Axios.
Was he though?
Okay, guys, by the way, look, it's not like we're saying, okay, he doesn't agree with the left, so JD Vance shouldn't be the nominee for the Republicans. No. I'm saying be true to your own principles. So is there anybody on the right doing that? Sure they are. Tom Massey is, Marjorie Taylor Greene is. So I can show you exact examples of someone sticking with their right-wing ideology, their anti-war ideology, and all the things that they ever said. And we disagree with them on other things, and some of the things that they're is still consistent on. But at least you go, okay, there's a person I can trust means what they say, even if I disagree with what they say, right? But don't tell me, oh no, you should trust what I say because I secretly thought it in my head.
Right. All right, you're gonna have a conversation with Kenny Clips.
I am indeed.
Super excited.
Yeah, Clips got a story on DHS list, getting a list of domestic terrorists ready. You saw a video about it. And then there's the warrantless intrusions into our homes. Ken's got that. We'll talk a little bit of Israel as well. So that's coming up at the Revolution. You know the show is live every day. Young Turks is 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern and 8 p.m. We're doing the Revolution and doing all sorts of different interesting interviews there. And so we're gonna do that in a second. So for all of you who wrote in, thank you. K-Dragon Battling for Truth and Justice is the last one I'll read. I love it when they disagree like this on air, referring to me and Anna. It shows that TYT is a company of individuals, not monitored or controlled by some higher corporate power.
Very true.
Yes, thank you. We appreciate that. And for those, although some people thought, oh, we're controlled by Peter Thiel. F Peter Thiel. How about that? Is that clear enough? Well, I'll be right back.
Stop with the questions. Celebrate. Woo!
right, back on Revolution. We're gonna do a great interview with Ken Klippenstein in a second about the Department of Homeland Security and their list of domestic terrorists and not using warrants. But there's a couple of comments that I want to read from the Young Turks because they're so representative, and I hope you'll get something out of them. First, Box wrote it on Super Chat. You get to exercise your First, Second, and Fourth Amendment rights at the same time. As a pro Second Amendment guy, I promise you I will not forget this treasonous flip-flop. He's referring to the Trump administration and their flip-flop on the Second Amendment. So that, I think, will be remembered by a good number of people, and that is not going to help Trump or the Republicans in 26 or 28. Nicodemus 1969, thank you for joining. They hit the join button below on YouTube, and you could do likewise. And Police the White House on the member section on tyt.com said, I'm not willing to cheer for Tucker either. I just happen to agree with him on a few things lately. I still don't trust him, and I think he's an opportunist who will distance himself from our side with Trump, depending on which way the wind blows. Anybody with a half a brain can see he's running for president and realizes he has to move toward the middle. Vance is doing it too, a little bit. So the reason I read that is, guys, because I don't want you to get confused about what we're saying. Just because somebody agrees with you 2, 3, or 8 times, or even 12 times, doesn't mean that you have to trust them completely, or that you're on their side completely. Please, you don't have to think about it in a binary way. So even in the tweet that Marjorie Taylor Greene had today, the long one, generally being on our side, saying don't go to civil war, don't shoot people in the streets, there was 3 things I totally disagreed with, right? So there's nothing wrong with that, nothing at all. Just when they agree with us, take yes for an answer, that's it. You don't have to love Tucker or Marjorie Taylor Greene, you don't have to vote for them, you don't have to support them. All you have to say is, hey, we agree on that, great. And by the way, thank you for coming to our position. That's a beautiful thing. So, and lastly, Kelly K says, Cenk and TYT, thank you for having Keith Edwards on last week. After the shooting, he started a GoFundMe. And with the help of his community, he has reached over $1.3 million in less than 48 hours. In the wake of the horrendous tragedy, it's beautiful to see people from all over the globe come together to honor a beautiful soul murdered by the state-sanctioned terrorist. Rest in peace, Alex. Couldn't agree more with you, Kelly. Thank you for sending that message in. And I had not seen that Keith did that. That's beautiful that Keith Edwards did that. I'm really proud that we had him on the show on Friday, bringing a lot of folks on the left and independents together here, and now even, especially on the Revolution, some on the right as well, saying, look up, that's where your problems are. So great job by Keith Edwards. All right, now let's go to our former TYT contributor, Ken Klippenstein. Check him out on Substack and support him there because he's doing brilliant work. Ken, welcome back, brother.
Hey, so good to be with you again, Cenk.
All right, so Ken, you had a couple of interesting news stories about the Department of Homeland Security. First, tell us about your source telling you about lists that they're keeping of so-called domestic terrorists.
Yeah, so they've been tasked formally to take pictures and identifying information of anyone who's taking pictures of them. That's it. They don't have to be doing anything else. So protester standing on the street taking a photograph of an ICE agent or a Border Patrol agent or anyone in the task force, that's enough. That's sufficient cause for them to run your license plate, to take a picture of you and use the biometrics, bring that back for what was described to me as a run-up by intelligence, which is kind of an informal way of saying they're going to run you through a database and see what they can find out about you so they can map your associations and try to figure out, as was described to me, what this network of actors is, because the Trump administration is convinced, without any evidence that we've seen publicly, that there's some kind of orchestrated effort to fund and bankroll and motivate these protesters.
Yeah, well, look, so on the funding of things, I totally get it, because the right wing is doing projection. In almost all the right wing protests are financed by some corporate interest, and they don't know that. The people going to the protests don't know that at all. But of course, the famous case of the Koch brothers pulling up with giant buses for the Tea Party guys, with messages that help their corporation and abuse the American people, on and on it goes. So they assume the left is doing it as well. But Ken, I wanted to ask you, they're putting this as so-called domestic terrorists. That's super scary. I want to come back to that. But take away the title. Is any part of this program seemingly illegal? Or can they go, okay, you went to a protest, your left-wing protest or a right-wing protest, I'm now going to gather all the information I can about you and keep you on a list?
I think the scariest thing about it is that it probably is legal because President Trump designated quote unquote Antifa as a domestic terror group, the first such designation of any domestic American group publicly via executive order like that. And from that and NSPM 7, presidential memorandum he promulgated last year, that gives extraordinary power to the intelligence community to target Americans with a lot of the same sorts of tools that they used against groups like Al-Qaeda and ISIS, foreign terrorist organizations, real ones with financing and institutional structure, almost like states. They can use all of that now against what the administration considers to be Antifa. And when I was reporting on this early on, a big frustration of mine was it was sort of met with skepticism on the part of a lot of people who said, oh, there's no such thing as Antifa. But guys, this is Trump's definition of Antifa. He might define that differently than you and I do. He might define that much more broadly than you and I do. And I think that's what we're seeing happen now.
Ken, this is tangential to the main conversation, and I'm going to get back to the abuse of our rights, et cetera. But I'm gonna ask you a funny question. Is there even such a thing as Antifa? Because what I mean by that is, I get that some guys went to protest some years ago, and I guess they called themselves Antifa. So I'm not saying that that didn't happen. What I'm asking is there any infrastructure, as far as you can tell, any real organization? Because I've never seen it. It doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. That's why I'm asking.
I think it exists in the sense that Anonymous exists, the hacker collective from the 2010s or so, and that is to say, it's a word that people might use to describe themselves. But do they have a physical location? Do they have a PO box? Do they have an LLC? The answer to those questions is no. I mean, I assume there's some nonprofit out there, maybe somewhere, that has two guys that they call Antifa or something. But any kind of presence commensurate with those groups I was talking about before, Al-Qaeda and ISIS, no way, not even close. Not even close. I mean, I've gone to these protests and kind of had some fun asking people, saying, "Are you Antifa? Have you seen the Antifa cell?" And a lot of people would say, "Yeah, I'm Antifa." Like, I would consider myself opposed to fascism, but it was clear that there's no, formal group or designation. So a lot of this is like what you said at the top of the segment, where there are these, I would go to protests, and sometimes there would be maybe there'd be some Democrat group, present somewhere. That doesn't mean that everyone in the group is like being directed by them, or that's just the guys that set up the first thing. And then there's a lot of spontaneous participation on the part of ordinary people that want to go out and do something. It doesn't mean that it's all some orchestrated plot. So long story short, do I think the admin can find some shaky basis to say, oh, this guy has Antifa on his Instagram account or something? Yeah, I'm sure. And that's why I'm very skeptical of the idea that the law is going to protect us here, because they can find, just like with statistics, you can make a case with anything. And that's how the law is for national security in this country, unfortunately.
But Ken, one more thing about that. Any source you have in intelligence, in Homeland Security, in the government at all, ever show you anything that says, yeah, this money from Antifa headquarters or a funder that it doesn't call themselves Antifa but is a funder has gone to this branch of Antifa or that branch of Antifa? Because I've never seen that in the news. They just say like, oh, Antifa is this or that, but I've never seen any facts regarding that at all, especially when it comes to funding. But again, I don't want to miss it. Have you ever had anybody show you evidence like that?
Well, I have seen one intelligence report, and you're going to laugh at my saying this. It was based on, they have some kind of commercial database that they can trawl through and find information about people. And I'll report this at some point. And they described someone as being a key figure within Antifa. And so I am, leafing through this intelligence report. And I realize their evidence for that this guy's Antifa is like you were saying before. He had Antifa on his profile on his social media account or something. And they take that to mean, oh, he must be a critical node within the structure. So a lot of what's happening is these guys were trained and came up in what's called the global war on terror, fighting those groups I was describing before, Al Qaeda and ISIS. And so the way you go about fighting those groups is the theory was to map out the structure and figure out who's financing it, where are the fighters, where are they being trained. They're taking that exact same approach. Someone like Kash Patel, the FBI director, came up in that exact war on terror, and that's what they've been trained to do. And so that's what they're applying to this, very loosely organized group. To quote Trump's first FBI director, who he fired, a loosely affiliated just idea, not a organized group. And so I have seen intelligence report, but that doesn't mean that it exists in the sense that you're asking me. It just means that some guys in a room got together and convinced themselves that it does.
Yeah, so no checks or anything that they've gotten, that they've tracked. Interesting. Look, I don't want to give them any ideas, but the analogy there is, it's like I call myself a populist. Populism is not a group, it's not an organized infrastructure, but there's tons of populists in the country, right? And from time to time, we organize as in, hey, let's go and do a protest, or let's go do a petition. Is that a group now? No, it's just populism. And by the way, you could say that about capitalists, you could say it about Marxists, you could say it about almost anyone. That's just a general term for folks. But okay, now back to the main point. So what happens if you're on this list? Do you know if there's any ramifications yet?
So what was described to me was that Border Patrol in particular, who is central to this whole ICE operation, we use ICE as shorthand, but ICE is really the task force that's in charge. It involves a lot of Border Patrol agents too, because they can operate within 100 miles of any border, which happens to include where most of Americans live. They are taking this. I know that they're taking this information back and they plug it into a database called IRS. I can't remember exactly what it stands for. I'll have a story about it shortly. And what that does is it spits out information about where they live, their home address, property. They're running their favorite thing to do is run license plates. And if you look at the video that was posted a couple days ago, where one person was just photographing the law enforcement, this was an observer. He starts taking pictures of her license plate, and she says, "Why are you doing that?" And he says, "Because we got a nice little database, and now you're going to be a domestic terrorist. So have fun with that." An ICE agent actually said that on camera to this woman, who, as far as I can tell, wasn't doing anything but just taking a picture of him. So I went back, talked to my own sources. They said, "Yeah, we plug it into this database that gives us this whole network of information to kind of profile these individuals." And what we do, if you try to see, do they have outstanding warrants? Can we tie them to other actors that we're watching? All based on this worldview that there's some kind of orchestrated cabal that's pulling the strings behind these things, as opposed to what I have seen when I go and talk to protesters, which is just everyday people that want to get involved and care about it. And there is no big structure behind the scenes. So as I understand it, that's what's going on with this intelligence collection.
Yeah, it's interesting because you mentioned they're basically trying to treat American citizens like they would with ISIS or Al Qaeda. And I'm a little bit worried about something I've called Israelification of our government. That once you label someone a terrorist, as Israel does, then you could do anything you want to them, including killing them. And because they're enemies of the state, they're the boogeyman, they're the terrorists. And so I don't know if there's any crossover from the, but I guess you're saying the guys that were, is it? So let me ask you the fourth question, because again, I'm not sure, and I think you might know. Like, so when you say the guys who are fighting ISIS and Al Qaeda, were they like, because I know law enforcement now is working with the IDF in a lot of different ways. Did those guys ever work with the IDF? Is this idea of calling Americans terrorists coming from somewhere else, or that just because of their work on ISIS organically came up?
There's definitely joint training between Border Patrol and other federal law enforcement agencies and the Israeli security services, if only because it's such a close ally of the US government, and they share so much stuff, not just intelligence, but resources and other things. But I think what's really happening is that we never really rolled back the calendar. It's kind of as if 9/11 happened yesterday, because a lot of the stuff that we created in response to it, the Department of Homeland Security being one thing, we never went back and said, okay, Al Qaeda is defeated, or it's not enough of a concern anymore. We can go back to how life was before. We never did that. we basically the whole legal basis around those wars is still in effect. The DNA of the Patriot Act, exists in Homeland Security, which was designed to be a counterterrorism entity. And when you talk about ICE, which is obviously in the news all the time, that didn't used to exist under the Department of Homeland Security. That used to be a responsibility of the Justice Department. And so immigration was treated more as like a civil or criminal matter rather than a counterterrorism matter. And the reason that's important is because counterterrorism is a very aggressive approach. People hear the word, they just think it means you're taking it seriously. But what it really means is that you are stripping away the usual criminal predicate that you need in order to open an investigation, because you're trying to counter an attack before it has happened. You have to try to preempt it. And the reasoning behind that, which I'm skeptical of, but people seem to have accepted, is, if there's a terror attack that is so big like 9/11, it justifies us going around and, setting people up and giving them the means to commit something. Because the thought is it's so dangerous that we're going to take the gloves off and we're going to have an extraordinary approach to it that doesn't follow the usual rules of law enforcement. That's basically what we've seen with immigration. It has been elevated to a national security issue, has been treated as a counterterrorism issue. And that's why you have Border Patrol and ICE in the streets of not just Minneapolis, but major cities around the country responding the way they are with these masks and, we're calling any protester a terrorist or saying that they're impeding them. That's all that counterterrorism mindset. That would make sense in Fallujah. That would make sense in Iraq. But they haven't. They're using the same thing in American streets, which is just wildly out of proportion to any supposed threat there is, and it's really unhealthy because everyone has just accepted this. I don't see much in the way of Democrats, for instance, in this budget fight. They're like, let's get rid of Kristi Noem, let's get rid of Bovino, all of which is fine, but you're still allowing immigration to be run out of this counterterrorism entity, Department of Homeland Security, when you could just go back to how it was in 2001, right before the attacks. That's what needs to be debated now. And it's not, everyone has just sort of turned the page and accepted that this is how things are going to be forever.
Oh, the Democrats going along with the Republicans. That's got to be a first. And of course, 7 Democrats in the House voted to fund ICE along with the Republicans. In fact, if they didn't, Republicans would have lost that vote. So they delivered, as they always do, for their Republican friends. One silver lining out of this, I hate violence and for 100% nonviolence. And so good news is if you're on the left, by the way, also if you're on the right, if somebody comes and tells you that you should do violence, they're probably an agent. They're probably a literal federal agent, so don't listen to them and don't ever do the violence. Okay, now speaking of the right, Ken, Democrats are not necessarily inclined in this particular direction, although could be. Could they just turn this apparatus against the right wing? Guys, Trump came up with Antifa as a theoretical organized group when it isn't. And the Democratic president can say something that is far more organized are militias, right? And the militias do have weapons, they do have infrastructure, they have some degree of financing, they have a lot of anti-government positions, and they do protest and sometimes with weapons. So seems like it's pretty easy to weaponize this against the right as well.
Totally. I think that's why there needs to be a social pact that we're just not going to use the powers that we use against, basically quasi states like ISIS. We're not going to do that in this country because we believe in a free society, and because any threat that exists, however real, they're just not ISIS. Like as bad as things are here, I don't think we can say that it's quite that bad. So you're exactly right. And it's so short-sighted because when either party comes into the White House, they have an opportunity to change this, but they decide not to because they realize, oh, I could use this. And a lot of conservatives would say that that apparatus was used against people, for instance, on January 6th. And I'm sympathetic to that point, not that there weren't people that should have been prosecuted, but I don't think it needed to be treated like a counterterrorism matter. It could have been treated as a routine criminal matter, but unfortunately, we revert to this thing because it's just, I don't know what it is. We never went back to pre 9/11, and you see this every time something terrible happens. People say we gotta swing the counterterrorism sledgehammer. This thing is terrorism, and I don't think they quite realize what that entails, and we're seeing it now.
Yeah, if you've got a militia that's organized and they're going to attack someone or they're going to commit some sort of crime, I'm not saying don't arrest them. I'm saying don't use this nonsense rubric of terrorism, right? And take away their rights. No, they should have American rights. And then if they're going to commit a crime, we should do normal investigation, get warrants, and arrest them. So it doesn't have to be extreme, like we let everyone go or we call everyone terrorists. So speaking of which, like in terms of the extremes and how they're going to start to conduct themselves, what's going on with these? I don't want to say warrantless searches, but they have this excuse of an administrative warrant that ICE is now sometimes using. Help us understand that.
Yeah, so when you look at the immigration system, and I'll preface this saying I'm not a lawyer, a lot of people look to there being some kind of judicial process over it. What they don't realize is that the immigration courts, that's in the executive branch. They're not really a judiciary. And so they can have these things that are clearly not due process, where you have hundreds of people in the room and the judge just swings the gavel and they've made one decision for an entire group of people, because you don't have that same due process like imperative that the judicial branch does. And because of that, they can do all kinds of wonky things that I don't think they should be able to. But again, the law is not going to save you. Like, this stuff has to be debated on its merits. And I think that the way that you could go about doing that is saying, okay, from the perspective of the significant majority of the country that wants there to be aggressive deportations, specifically of violent felons, that's what there's a majority of support for, and that support collapses when you get outside of the violent felon kind of criteria. You should be asking yourself, how effective is this at that? How effective is it having Border Patrol basically being riot response or like essentially crowd control and following protesters around? And how many protesters has ICE and the Justice Department indicted for supposed impediment of law enforcement? How effective is all of those responsibilities at getting done that thing I just mentioned, deporting violent felons? It's not very effective. It's a huge waste. They're not trained in that. They don't know how to do it. They're not right for it. And they're immigration authorities. So they're not supposed to be doing this stuff, but because they're in Homeland Security, they've been kind of national security-ized, and that's how they approach everything. And so they have this, when I talk to people in these agencies, we might not agree on all sorts of things. But one thing they do agree on is they say, I wish we could go back to the immigration focus that we had prior to 9/11, instead of all this headache of counterterrorism mumbo jumbo that we're talking about now.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the point that has to be made rather than the legal one, because I guarantee you start flipping through national security law, you're not going to be satisfied with what you see.
So Ken, let me give a Democratic example and see if I've got it right. I was furious when Barack Obama and Eric Holder said that they could kill Anwar al-Awlaki, who was a US citizen, without any kind of judicial process. And they said, no, due process doesn't have to necessarily be judicial process. It could just be the executive branch checking with each other. You want to kill him? Yeah, I want to kill him too. High five, we go kill him, right? So is that basically what's happening here with the warrants? They're not going to a judge. There's two guys on the Trump team going, you want to break into their house? Yeah. You want to break into it? Yeah. Here's your administrative warrant. Go break into their house. We're not asking any judge, and you don't need any stinking evidence.
Yeah, again, I'm not a lawyer, but I've covered national security for about 10 years now. And what I've learned is that whenever you flip through the law, you realize the courts are very deferent to the state when it comes to national security. And so that's not a fight that the public can often win. And the goal is then to move things outside of the domain of national security so that you don't have to deal with that stuff. Because just like you said, what you said is exactly right. Their argument was essentially the Constitution says that you need due process. It doesn't say anything about a court, about your day in court. So therefore, Obama calling up his buddy in the Justice Department, well, we consider that due process. And the courts are basically fine with that, because when it comes to national security, both culturally and legally, they're obligated to basically defer to the executive branch. So it's very dangerous to have this stuff concentrated in the national security space because of that.
You'll know, guys at home, that we've got the right person in office the minute they start undoing those things. Because if they're a normal uniparty establishment, Democrat or Republican, they will never undo those things. And they need to be undone so we can get back to America and our Constitution. So Ken, we're running short on time, but I do want to ask you about one other topic, which is funding for Israel. So every once in a while, a news story will come out and they'll go, oh, the last one was Trump has given $3.3 billion in weapons to Israel. Or they'll say, which is hilarious because mainstream media are, in my opinion, are enormous liars. And so they'll say, Israel has bought these weapons. Then when you read into the 17th paragraph, like, yeah, bought them with our money. So it's absurd. So that part we know is a lie, right? So that I don't have to ask you about that. But 3.3 billion popped up a couple of weeks ago. And a couple of weeks before that, $8.6 billion popped up. And I read dozens of articles and no one ever clarified, where the hell's this money coming from? Is it from the old memorandum of understanding where we're supposed to give them 3.8 billion a year? Is it a new appropriation? I don't remember anybody voting on a new appropriation. Is it from the next memorandum of understanding that doesn't even exist? So can anyone track all of the money we're funneling over to Israel? And does anybody even know if it's legal? Has Congress even voted on that 3.3 or that 8.6?
Well, again, national security law, it's like Calvin ball. I'm sure there's some very complicated and frankly ridiculous, calculations going on in the background that if you were to go over it, they technically check the boxes. Maybe it doesn't match the spirit of what it's supposed to be, but they will have technically checked things, and that's all the law is did you technically check the boxes? So to your question, you're not missing anything. It's extraordinarily complicated. I've gone through that exact same process when I've done stories on US aid to Israel, trying to even just get a handle on it. It's kind of like in Congress when they have poison pills and they have all these, they have all of these legislative tactics that they can use to try to obfuscate. I mean, we're talking about a big story now is Homeland Security funding. They had designed it in such a way so that the Democrats wouldn't have to risk being associated with voting for the budget and being seen as voting for Homeland Security in particular because of how they structured it. So they play all these games for that exact and express reason to make it difficult for you to come away with a top line figure. Because if that was possible, people would freak out just like they have about aid to Ukraine. Because it's an extraordinarily large number going to, unlike in the case of the Ukraine, an extraordinarily wealthy country. Israel is a rich, developed country. And so I think that's part of the reason that it's so hard to figure it out. And there's also very few people that ask. If you look at the think tanks that exist, it's just not something that there's very much appetite for.
No, you know who's in control when the media refuse to ask the simplest question. Where did that money come from? You can't get a simpler question if you're covering the government, national security, whatever your vertical is in your particular publication or your media outlet. If your job is to cover that and they go, hey, we just gave 8.6 billion to Israel, your first question would be, from what? Where did that money come from? And literally no mainstream media reporter dares to ask that question because they're afraid they'll be fired by some Israel first apparatchik inside their own organization. This is insanity. So until anyone clarifies it for me, and literally there is zero reporters in the country, I have asked, there is zero that can explain where that money came from. Until then, 8.6, 3.3, that's $11.9 billion. Trump stole $12 billion from us, the American taxpayers, and gave it to Israel illegally, and not a single goddamn reporter will ask about it. And so I'm sick of it. And if someone can prove to me that it's not stolen and there was actually a vote on it, I'm very happy to be corrected. But until then, Trump stole 12 billion from all of you to give it to his beloved Israel because they bribed him with over $300 million. That's Sheldon and Miriam Adelson, who are Israelis and hate this country. They flew Jonathan Pollard, a traitor, out to Israel on their private jet. That's how much they despise our country and are traitors to it. Anyways, that's me editorializing. So, all right, Ken, if you ever find out where that money came from, please come back here first and tell us. I don't want to get anything wrong, but for now, I'm going to assume that money is stolen. And so open to finding out if we ever goddamn voted on it. That's how it's supposed to work in America, but unless you're Israel, no. I mean, imagine saying, oh, by the way, we just gave Portugal $12 billion. Why? Where did it come from? Shut up, right? You're anti-Portuguese and you'll be fired, right? You'd say that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. But it happens with Israel over and over and over again. So, okay, if you're fine with Israel being the boss of us, then you're not really that American, but okay, fine. But I'm not. Anyways, Ken, thank you for doing the journalism on it. If you find out any more information on that, we're all ears. And I can't wait for a day when we don't have all these abuses and we don't need Ken Klippenstein as much.
I would much prefer that. I mean, in some ways it's good for me, but I would much rather have it be hard for me to find stuff to write about.
Yeah, let's do a campaign to get the government so clean that Ken has to get a different job.
They give me a week off here.
So get him to transfer to another part of journalism, then we'll clean that place up, etc. So Kenny Clips, legendary. Everybody check him out on Substack. Ken Klippenstein. Anything else, Ken, that you want people to check out on things you've written?
I will have a couple stories on the stuff that's going on with Border Chief Bovino shortly, and the mission in Minneapolis, which is way different than how it's being discussed by the Trump administration. I mean, they're trying very hard to project strength and certitude, which does not exist within those agencies when you talk to people in them.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Ken. Appreciate it, brother.
Thanks.
All right. All right, guys. You know what? I was going to do a quick bonus episode for you guys, but I realize I'm saving it for old school. So I got fun stories coming for you from a couple of trips that I did recently. But Michael and I are going to do old school on Tuesday, so make sure you check that out if you're a member. That's tyt.com/join to become a member. Much love, guys. We'll see you tomorrow.